Chapter 630. The middle-aged cultivator brightly smiled. Guest, you absolutely won't regret your decision. I will immediately call someone to bring you to rest. He winked and then said in an ambiguous tone, in addition, the Merchant Association has prepared additional benefits for fellow Taoists on board. If any of the maids here catch your fancy, you can directly tell me. Until you board the ship, they will be your personal maid. Qin Yu shook his head. There is no need. The cultivation method I cultivate doesn't allow me to be too close to women. The middle-aged cultivator had a strange expression. His eyes were full of sympathy. In his opinion, if he couldn't be close to women, then his life would be worse than death. Soon, a cultivator arrived and politely asked Qin Yu to leave. The young maid was left at a loss for what to do before she was pulled away to continue entertaining other guests. On the third floor of the wooden building, on both sides of a long corridor, there were separate rooms. Just as Qin Yu stepped onto the last step, a door not too far away suddenly opened and a nearly naked woman ran out. Her hair was disheveled and her snow-white skin was covered in bruises. As she saw Qin Yu and the cultivator leading the way, she screamed and threw herself at them. "Save me! Please save me! There is a madwoman inside!" Her screams were filled with fear. Whoosh! A rope flew out from the door and wrapped around the woman's neck. It pulled her to the ground and pulled her into the room. The woman's expression became even more panic-stricken. Her hands gripped the carpet so tightly that her nails broke off one by one. The air was filled with the smell of blood. "Save me! Save me!" The Merchant Association cultivator leading the way had a calm expression, as if he didn't see what was happening in front of him. When the door slammed shut, he smiled and gestured, "Guest, please follow me." He stepped on his broken nails and allowed his boots to be dyed red with blood. Then he pushed open the door. "You can stay here for the time being. If you need anything, just ring the bell in the room. If it isn't necessary, it is best not to casually leave the room. I won't disturb your rest. Oh, that's right, my name is White Deer. Before you board the ship, I will take care of everything here." He bowed and left. Qin Yu entered the room and closed the door behind him. His ears immediately fell silent. He closed his eyes, and his divine sense quietly flowed out like a trickling stream, sweeping through every corner of the room. After several breaths of time, Qin Yu's eyes flashed. He quietly glanced at a potted plant behind the door. "I hope my luck is good this time and I can come back alive. Once I pay off this debt, I will never gamble again." Qin Yu clenched his teeth and fell onto the deck, his breathing becoming long and steady. He had really fallen asleep. Tempering one's will was hard work. In addition to the backlash from the demon mark, he had fallen asleep many times during this time, but he had never truly relaxed. By the time he woke up, the sky had already darkened. The sealed stone world did not have a clear distinction between day and night. A dark gray sky represented night. Qin Yu sat up from his bed. He drank a cup of tea and rang the bell. Bai Lu soon knocked on the door. He smiled and said, "What does guest need?" "Get some food and drinks. Also, when will the ship leave?" "We can't always wait here," Qin Yu said with a frown. Bai Lu said, "The ship will depart in about 2 days. Please wait patiently. If you have no other questions, I will go down to prepare your food." Qin Yu nodded. "I'll have to trouble you then." Bai Lu smiled. "As long as you're satisfied." He turned and left. Just as Qin Yu sat down at the table, there was a loud bang from the door. He stood up and opened it. What he saw caused him to frown. The young maid he saw during the day was struggling on the ground with a look of fear. A middle-aged cultivator with a bloody face was grabbing her ankle and pulling her outside. "You smelly whore, I gave you face, but you didn't want it. You actually dared to break my head. Today I will definitely serve you well." There was the sound of the door opening. The young maid turned her head, and her eyes of despair suddenly erupted with light. Guest, I beg you, please help me." The middle-aged cultivator was startled. He revealed a bit of annoyance. I apologize for disturbing guests' rest. I will immediately take her away. At this time, Bai Lu arrived with a box of food. His complexion changed, and he asked, Tong Yin, what are you doing? The middle-aged cultivator let go, a nervous expression on his face. It's nothing. We will leave now. Qin Yu suddenly said, I should be able to choose a maid to serve me, right? Tong Yin fiercely looked up, hatred in his eyes. You didn't want the woman I gave you before, and now you actually interfered and ruined my plans? Bai Lu said, Of course you can. This is your right. Qin Yu lifted a hand and pointed. Her. Bai Lu smiled. Starting from now, she belongs to you. The food in the box is enough for 2 people. If it isn't enough, I can help you take more. He looked at Tong Yin. Why haven't you left yet? Are you waiting for me to personally send you off? Tong Yin coldly snorted and angrily left. Bai Lu glanced at the young maid. Go and freshen up, Qin Yu interrupted him. There's no need. Just follow me inside. Bai Lu nodded. He passed the food box to her, gave her a meaningful look, and then bowed and excused himself. Qin Yu looked at the young maid. Come in. Carrying the food box, the pale-faced young maid bit her lips and followed in. With a creak, the sound of the door closing caused her body to shake. Put down the food box and sit down. Qin Yu lightly said, Don't worry. Because of my cultivation method, I can't casually approach women. You are safe. The young maid clearly let out a sigh of relief. Qin Yu revealed a helpless expression. He hastily ate his meal and then sat down cross-legged on the bed. If you feel safe, then you can leave on your own. There is no need to tell me. But when Qin Yu opened his eyes once more, she was still in the room. Qin Yu glanced at her and then pulled the bell. A moment later, Bai Lu brought over a second food box. According to Qin Yu's request, the amount had been increased. The young maid wolfed down her food. Her appetite was astonishing. It wasn't until she burped that she slowed down, blushing. After chewing and swallowing for a long time, she put down her chopsticks and carefully tidied them up before placing them to the side. Seeing Qin Yu close his eyes to cultivate once more, the young maid revealed a struggling look. After a long time, she bit her lips and stood up to take off her clothes. A rustling sound entered his ears. Qin Yu sighed. I have no interest in you. If you want to do this, then leave. The young maid stammered. I am clean. Qin Yu shook his head. It has nothing to do with that. He pulled the bell. I will have Bai Lu take you away. He will ensure your safety. Bai Lu soon knocked on the door. Qin Yu directly said, If I come back alive, I will give you 5 medium-grade beads as a reward. If you guarantee that she is safe, I will give you 2. If I die, the agreement will automatically become invalid. How about it? Bai Lu smiled and nodded. Of course. I agree to your conditions. 2 medium-grade beads. In the sealed stone world, that was an extremely high purchasing power. Qin Yu said, Now take her away. Before I leave, I want to be in my peak condition. The young maid bowed in shame. Thank you, guest. I will wait for you to return. Following behind Bai Lu, the 2 left. After leaving the 3rd level, the restlessness on the young maid's face disappeared. Bai Lu stopped and bowed. Greetings, Lady Montois. The young maid lightly said, He is just a good person. There's no need to investigate any further. Yes. Bai Lu hesitated. But if it's like this, the plan has been disrupted. How will you follow me to the bewildering Fog Sea? The young maid said, Didn't a maid die? I can replace her. Bai Lu said, What about that person just now? The young maid's lips curled up. Isn't that better? They have their own contradictions, so I can save a great deal of effort. It's decided. She walked away. Bai Lu bowed. After she left, he looked up at the 3rd floor, a mocking light in his eyes. 3rd floor room. Qin Yu was sitting with his back to the door, a calm expression on his face. It was a good thing that others thought he was stupid. At the very least, he could avoid a great deal of unnecessary trouble. What he wanted was to borrow the ship to enter the fog sea and find the place where the stone beads were born. As for the rest, he would do it himself, so he didn't need to waste time acting. Pitiful little maid, ha 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 ha. Following this, Qin Yu stayed in his room. When Bai Lu came to call him, it was time to board the ship. He pushed open the door and heard a burst of laughter. Another door opened from the inside, and a large man walked out with a petite figure in his arms. Seeing Qin Yu, the petite figure stiffened and quickly lowered her head. Qin Yu sneered inwardly, but he had no choice but to cooperate. He revealed a stiff expression. Bai Lu had an awkward expression. I apologize to guest, but this is the decision of the Chamber of Commerce. I have no way to refuse. Qin Yu nodded without expression. Were you the one who drove Softy out of her room? How unromantic. But if it weren't for that, how could such a beauty belong to me? The large man's face was fierce and fierce. Looking at how tactful you are, I will forgive you for seeing that cheap slut's naked body. From now on, stay away from Softy and don't look for trouble for yourself. He laughed and left. Bai Lu said in a low voice, Softy will board the ship with you. Qin Yu coldly snorted and left. He thought that once he boarded the ship, he would stay in his room and not come out. He didn't have the energy to accompany these people and play out such a melodramatic plot. Outside the market, the wooden ship had already stopped. Qin Yu and the other 17 people boarded. During this process, many eyes fell on them. Their sneers were filled with pity, as if they were looking at a dead person. Ripples appeared on the surface of the wooden ship. A protective shield rose up, and the ship began to move forwards. It was extremely fast. In just several breaths of time, it had left the market far behind. Bai Lu stood at the bow of the ship, his eyes calm. It will take us around 2 hours to reach the ship. During this time, I hope that everyone can carefully read through the jade slips placed next to your seats. They contain information about the bewildering fog sea, as well as things to pay attention to. Although this voyage will be dangerous, as long as everyone is careful enough, I believe we will be able to return alive. Humph! I hope so. It was unknown who sneered, but the atmosphere on the ship was stifling. Bai Lu faintly smiled. He turned and sat down without a care in the world. His mission was about to be completed. Moreover, there was no need to be angry with a group of people who were doomed to die. Qin Yu picked up the jade slip. After sensing that there was nothing wrong with it, he probed it with his divine sense. After several breaths of time, he opened his eyes. They flashed for a moment before returning to tranquility. There was very little information about the bewildering fog sea in the jade slip, but as long as one was willing, they could obtain some harvests. For instance, the fog in the bewildering fog sea could disturb a cultivator's mind. Once one lost their way, they would forever remain within, becoming a walking corpse that wandered about in the fog. Or there was a chance that special fog sea tides would bring out stone beads. Comparing all the information he had, although he didn't have absolute confidence, there was a high chance that the bewildering fog sea was the source of all the stone beads in the sealed stone world. The reason Qin Yu entered the bewildering fog sea was to find the place where the stone beads were born. The wooden ship moved towards the outside of the sealed stone nebula. Qin Yu thought back to the nothingness behind him when he first arrived. Could it be that the bewildering fog sea was there? There was far too little information about the sealed stone world in the outside world. Even in the information that the demonic path had collected, there were many places that were suspicious. Soon 2 hours passed. The wooden ship smoothly left the range of the sealed stone nebula. A massive ship was calmly docked in the void. It was flat and covered with bumps and bumps, as if it were some sort of scale armor. As they approached, Qin Yu's heart chilled. As he looked at the ship, his eyes became dignified. This ship was actually refined from some sort of massive life form after some slight modifications. This was a ship and also its corpse. Even though it had died, the life form's aura hadn't completely dissipated. It was as heavy as an overturning mountain, pressing down on the mind and making it difficult to breathe. Bailu stood up and clapped his hands. "Everyone, we have arrived. Please follow the instructions and board the ship. There will be someone on board to make arrangements." Qin Yu suddenly frowned. He turned his head, his expression faint. In front of him, the pale young maid's eyes were filled with guilt and pain. Her lips moved, and she muttered, "I'm sorry," Qin Yu lightly said. "What choice you make is your freedom. There is no need to apologize to me." Looking at the young maid's pained and aggrieved eyes, he couldn't help but admit that this woman's acting skills were simply superb. She wasn't something that could be described as a mere best actress. Humph! The large man coldly coughed. His eyes were fierce. "Softy, what are you doing?" He grabbed her shoulder and pulled her back into his arms. He looked up at Qin Yu, the muscles on his face wriggling. "Brat, I warned you before. Don't make me say the same words a second time. Do you understand?" Qin Yu said, "Don't worry, I have an obsession with cleanliness. I won't touch things that have been used by others." The young maid stiffened. Qin Yu stepped away. He didn't want to be entangled with her any longer, so he could only directly use his ultimate move. Although he didn't know what this woman's goal was, if he heard those words, he would be able to remain silent for a long time. The large man roared, "You bastard, just who are you? You dare to insult my woman." He rushed forwards and was tightly hugged by the young maid. "No, the Merchant Association will not allow you to fight in private. I just wanted to express my gratitude to him. He doesn't want me to approach him, so it's fine if I stay away from him in the future. Don't be angry." The large man clenched his teeth. He can be considered lucky. The young maid in his arms glanced at Qin Yu's departing back, her eyes cold. Chapter 631. Qin Yu and the others were the last group of people to board the ship. There were already over 100 people waiting on the ship made from the body of a giant life form. These people had the same status as Qin Yu. They were all cultivators that accompanied the ship. That's right, the explanation that the 3 Amalgamations Trade Association gave them was that they needed to guard the treasure chest in the hold of the ship. All fellow Taoists have arrived. The ship that the 3 Amalgamations Trade Association is sending to the bewildering Fog Sea is about to set off. I ask everyone to remain seated and not move around. The person who spoke had a warm smile on his face. His eyes were clean and warm, making one feel close to him. Hum! The ship trembled and immediately began to move. Its speed rapidly increased, leaving behind a series of afterimages as it howled towards the direction of the Sealing Stone Nebula. Qin Yu's eyes brightened. His guess was right. The bewildering Fog Sea was there. After a moment, the ship stopped accelerating and entered a period of steady progress. The cultivator who spoke just now stood up from his seat and bowed. "Let me formally introduce myself. I am the 3 Amalgamations Trade Association's Shuhi, and I am responsible for managing this voyage. For the next half-month, I hope that everyone can help each other." He straightened himself. "I think many fellow Taoists are confused. Just what do you need to be responsible for following the ship that there is such a rich reward?" In truth, the answer is simple. There are some stone beads placed in the treasure chests in the hold. Our goal in entering the bewildering Fog Sea is to borrow their strength to enhance the quality of the stone beads. When the time comes, we will need fellow Taoists to help deliver the treasure chests to the designated locations. Although there are some dangers in the fog, we will do our best to approach the destination. As long as everyone is quick, there shouldn't be any problems. Of course, there is something I must remind everyone of. The bewildering Fog Sea is extremely dangerous. Staying near the ship can guarantee your safety, but if you leave the ship's protection... I believe everyone knows that many great figures have tried to unravel the truth of the bewildering Fog Sea, but none of them were able to leave. That last sentence was the key. We will give you the treasure chests, so you had best do your job honestly and not have any thoughts that you shouldn't have." Then, he spoke about the taboos of the bewildering fog sea. During this time, Qin Yu earnestly looked at him. His warm smile, his calm demeanor, and the attitude that he naturally revealed, all of this indicated that he had a high status in the Three Amalgamations Trade Association. But as Qin Yu looked at him, there was a bit of sympathy and pity in his eyes. Although he didn't know what happened to the others on the ship, compared to them, Shuhi's fate should be far more miserable. Far away from the nebula of the sealing stone, the big ship silently moved forward in the empty void. Unknowingly, wisps of mist suddenly appeared, like a veil fluttering in the wind at dusk, hazy, blurry, and difficult to see clearly. Shuhi's face froze slightly. "Everyone, we're about to enter the misty sea. Please remember my earlier warning. It's best not to make any mistakes, so as to avoid attracting trouble." The fog quickly thickened, like a mass of turbid water, swallowing the entire ship. Everything around them was vast and boundless. The atmosphere on the ship suddenly became oppressive. Shuhi smiled. "Everyone, don't worry. This is just the periphery of the bewildering fog sea. There's basically no—" Before he finished, his expression changed, and he turned around abruptly. Everyone was startled. They hurriedly followed his gaze and saw a blurry figure appear in the fog. Walking forward, the figure quickly became clear. It was a young female cultivator with a long sword on her back. Her white dress was like snow and her face was like the moon. But her eyes were ash gray, the same color as the fog. She silently moved forwards in a straight line. Suddenly, the female cultivator came to a stop. She tilted her head to look at the ship, as if sensing the fluctuations in the fog as it moved forwards. He stepped forwards. At the bow of the ship, two blood-red lights lit up. From their positions, they seemed to be the eyes of the life form that had refined the ship. A formidable pressure erupted from the ship. The female cultivator in the fog trembled, a trace of fear on her face. After several breaths of time, she turned and continued forwards. Soon, she passed by the ship and vanished from sight. "It's fine. He turned around, his complexion solemn. "Everyone, these are the walking corpses I mentioned to you. They are the people that walk in the fog. For countless years, they have entered the bewildering fog sea for various reasons. In the end, they die within and are forever imprisoned. These walking corpses are the greatest threat to the bewildering fog sea. Before they die, they have unwillingness and resentment in their hearts. Because of this, they develop a lingering obsession and want to drag others down with them. So, do not expose your aura. Once you are discovered by these walking corpses, it will be difficult to escape." Everyone on the ship had dignified expressions. Although they had only brushed past each other and the female cultivator in the fog hadn't done anything, they still felt an intense threat. Qin Yu's eyes drooped, concealing the strange light that flashed in his eyes. When the ship's eyes lit up just now and scared away the female cultivator, it seemed that it was because of the suppression of will. If this was true, then the so-called greatest threat of the bewildering fog sea was nothing but air to him. There was no hurry. He had to wait a little longer. He had to confirm this before proceeding to the next step. For the next 2 days, the ship encountered 3 more walking corpses. Luckily, they didn't cause any trouble. At this time, fluctuations rose in Qin Yu's mind. He opened his eyes and saw that deep within the fog he could vaguely see buildings. These were incomparably towering palaces that were tens of thousands of feet high. They seemed like the residences of heavenly divinities, exuding a dignified dignity. The ship carefully sailed along the edge of the palaces, like a small flying insect. The cultivators on the ship seemed even smaller. He stood at the bow of the ship. His voice was tinged with obsession as he subconsciously lowered it. "Everyone, we have arrived. This is our destination. You should all be curious about the origins of these divine palaces, but I apologize, I do not know. In fact, In the entire sealed stone world, no one knows. But there is one thing we can be sure of, and that is that the master of these divine palaces was an existence that surpassed our imaginations. Even if he died, the divine palaces he left behind still contain an infinite strength. What you need to do next is to send the treasure chests into the palace and borrow the strength of the palace to transform the stone beads in the treasure chests. He flicked his sleeves, and the deck parted. Treasure chests rose up on their own, appearing next to each seat. These treasure chests have been specially refined, so they cannot be placed into storage treasures. Everyone will have one, and in groups of 2, you will send the treasure chests out according to the instructions. Everyone, please remember to restrain your aura, because there are many, many walking corpses hidden in these palaces. Now, I ask everyone to drip a drop of blood onto the treasure chests. This is a simple contract so that you can move them without suffering a backlash. There are no restrictions on you, so you can inspect them before doing anything else. Qin Yu sensed with rapt attention. As Shuhi said, he didn't discover anything wrong, but he glanced at the little maid and felt that things weren't as simple as they seemed. After thinking for a moment, he asked in his soul space, "Mimi, Purple Moon, is there a problem with this chest?" After several breaths of time, Mimi hesitantly said, "There seems to be something wrong, but I can't sense it clearly. Big Sister is an expert in this aspect." A cold voice sounded out, "There is a problem." A moment later, Qin Yu and the others all dripped a drop of blood onto the treasure chest. It was directly absorbed, and a blood-red light flashed on its surface. A weak connection immediately appeared in their minds. And at this time, the ship flew around the palace and arrived at a remote corner. It seemed that a great battle had occurred here, and the towering palace had suffered a terrifying bombardment. Massive cracks appeared on the surface like spider webs. Although they were cracks, they were enough for cultivators to enter and exit. And this was where the treasure chests were placed. Shuhi said, "The 2 fellow Taoists of the first group, please enter this crack. Around 3 miles in, you will find a white stone platform. Place the chest on it." The 2 cultivators carried the treasure chests and stood up. A faint blood-red light spread over their bodies. Their figures flashed, and they flew out of the ship, soon submerging into the crack. In just several breaths of time, the 2 of them had returned. After entering the ship, their faces lit up with excitement. The mission had been completed. Everyone let out a long breath of relief as they saw this. Their expressions relaxed. It seemed it hadn't been too difficult. Then, the second group of cultivators entered and soon left without any problems. The 3rd group, the 4th group, the 5th group. The smile on Shuhi's face became increasingly bright. Their luck today had surpassed his expectations. More than half of the treasure chests had been placed, and nothing unexpected had occurred. Moments later, there were only 2 treasure chests left. He lifted a hand and pointed at Qin Yu. "Fellow Taoist, you 2 may set off." Across from him, the large man released the young maid's arm and silently stood up. At this time, there was an angry roar in the silent hall. A walking corpse drilled out from the crack. He held a torn piece of clothing in his hand and placed it between his nose and mouth, sniffing at it. Following that was a second walking corpse, a third walking corpse. In the blink of an eye, the area around the crack was filled with them. Their gray eyes glared at the ship, causing one's scalp to tingle and endless fear to surge up from the bottom of their hearts. "What is going on?" Shuhi paled. One of the group of cultivators that had just returned lifted his hand. Everyone could see that his sleeve was torn. I never thought it would be like this. I was too nervous at the time. I didn't have time to take it back." He glared at him with hatred in his eyes. "I already told you that you had to be careful." He took a deep breath and suddenly knelt to the ground. He lifted his hands and slapped them against the deck. With a loud hum, the ship trembled. The runes on the ship's surface lit up, and the scales on it began to emit light. The entire ship suddenly seemed to come to life, and the two balls of bloody light on the bow of the ship became even brighter. Roar! A deep roar echoed out from the ship. It seemed to cross the river of time, carrying with it an ancient and formidable aura. The approaching walking corpses froze. They emitted deep roars as they anxiously paced back and forth. Shoo! He spat out a mouthful of blood that seeped into the deck. A second roar sounded out from within the ship, this one even louder, and an even stronger will suppression was released. The walking corpses that occupied the crack began to retreat, soon vanishing completely. The scene before them was restored to the deathly stillness from before. Shu He's complexion was pale. Spitting out a mouthful of blood just now seemed to have consumed a great deal of his strength. His voice was clearly weak. Wait a moment before you enter. As he spoke, he sat down cross-legged. The large man crossed his arms across his shoulders, his expression indifferent. Qin Yu lowered his head, but in his eyes there was a hint of joy. It was true. After 2 consecutive times, he was able to confirm that what had scared away these walking corpses was the will suppression emitted by the ship. If so, there was no need for him to stay here any longer. Then he would take advantage of this chance to escape. Qin Yu had long been unwilling to continue playing house with those people from the 3 Unity Trade Association. That's right, with his current cultivation and strength, acting was extremely boring. Pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger was delightful, but one had to eat a tiger first. Who would be willing to do something like pretending to be a pig to eat a pig? After a moment, everything fell silent. Shuhi opened his eyes. All right, you can go in. Remember to be careful and don't stir up any more trouble. The large man grinned. Don't worry, I'm an old man. He looked at Qin Yu, revealing a set of white teeth. Shwa! Shwa! The 2 people flew out of the ship one after the other. With several flashes, they drilled into the crack. The temple was towering and tall, and the walls were shockingly thick. After flying for a mile, they passed through the crack and entered the temple. The inside was also filled with fog. After flying forwards for a bit longer, they finally found the white stone platform. The large man was the first to put down the treasure chest and retreat to the side. Qin Yu followed close behind. He flew in front of the stone platform and put down the treasure chest. At this time, a swift and fierce aura came from behind him. Qin Yu turned and lifted a hand, blocking the large man's fist. In this sort of place, do you think you can run away after harming me? The large man grinned. Of course. His body was like smoke, twisting and vanishing from sight. Smug laughter echoed out from the fog. Brat, enjoy the last moments of your life. Roar. The roars of the walking corpses echoed out. It was clear they had already sensed the aura of an outsider. In the fog, the large man's body was like a phantom as he rapidly flew out from the crack. He cultivated some sort of life-saving technique that allowed him to temporarily conceal his mortal body and conceal his aura. It was because of this that the large man was able to leave the bewildering fog sea alive twice in a row. And this time would be the 3rd time. Suddenly, a calm voice sounded out in his ears. Where are you going? The large man's eyes widened. He lifted a hand and punched out, but the space around him seemed to be filled with glue. Every movement was extremely difficult. The fog parted and Qin Yu stepped out. His expression was indifferent and a cold chill circulated in his eyes. It's not too late to run. If you kill me, you won't be able to leave. Qin Yu lightly said, I don't need to run. He lifted a hand and with a light cracking sound, a bloody hole appeared between the large man's eyebrows. His eyes were instantly extinguished and his soul was crushed to pieces, absorbed by the cosmic sea-cross bell. The surrounding fog wildly tumbled like a raging sea, its roars causing one's scalp to tingle. Outside the palace, on the ship, the young maid suddenly looked up towards the direction of the palace. A deep roar spread out from within. Her lips curled up in a cold smile. That bastard should be experiencing despair and fear right now, right? When she arranged for Chinyu to go in with the large man, she had already expected this to happen. But as time passed, no one came out from the crack. The young maid frowned. It seemed that bastard was quite strong. If he was able to drag him down with him, then that would be too easy for him. Lady Mantua had originally planned to wait until this matter was finished before greeting the large man and then sending him off to die. The commotion left as quickly as it came. After a moment, the interior of the palace quieted down. "Shu," he said in a low voice, "it looks like something happened to the two fellow Taoists. I hope they are safe." His heavy expression fell into everyone's eyes. In this situation, he still wanted to be safe? What kind of dream was that? But since it was someone else who died, they didn't care at all. Several men's eyes began to wander over the young maid. Soon 2 hours passed. "Shu," he stood up. "Everyone, according to the original order, retrieve your treasure chests and the mission will be considered complete." The first group of 2 cultivators flew out from the ship. They soon returned, their faces filled with shock and anger. "Our treasure chests are gone." "Shu," his complexion darkened. "You too. The treasure chests belong to the 3 Unity Trade Association. They have special spells that cannot be hidden." The 2 cultivators anxiously said, "They really are gone. We didn't do anything." Mantua frowned. She closed her eyes and began to form hand seals within her sleeves. Soon, the vague existence of 2 treasure chests appeared in her senses. They were in the palace in front of her, and they were in a moving state. It was clear they had been taken away. This sort of thing had happened before. The walking corpses had taken away the treasure chests placed on the stone platform, but the probability was very small. Luckily, there were only 2 chests, so the trade association could withstand this loss. Shuhi nodded. "Sit down first. The next group will set off." 2 more cultivators flew out, but after a dozen breaths of time, seeing the 2 returning empty-handed, Mantua suddenly stood up. "Our treasure chests are also gone." Something was wrong. Walking corpses taking away treasure chests was something that only happened once in several decades. But today, 2 altars had been taken away. There was definitely a problem. Mantua quickly formed hand seals and sensed the 2 treasure chests. They were also moving, and their positions seemed to be. Her eyes widened. She changed her hand seals and sensed the 2 treasure chests in front of her. Sure enough, they were in the same position. They weren't walking corpses. Although these inanimate objects were terrifyingly strong, they had long since lost their sanity. What was going on? Mantua was filled with shock and anger. She didn't care about her losses and hurriedly sensed the other treasure chests. They were moving, and their positions were all in the same position. "Ah!" Mantua screamed in anger. Her gentle and beautiful face twisted. "Who is it? Who are you?" Over 100 stone beads had been accumulated by the 3 Forces Trade Association over several years, and a considerable portion of them had been brought along by private individuals. To bring along private belongings on the 3 Forces Trade Association ship, anyone that could do this was absolutely a character with heaven-defying strength. If they lost the stone beads, would they give up? Thinking of this, Mantua's complexion paled and fear gushed out from the depths of her eyes. "Shut up! What are you making such a ruckus about?" A cultivator loudly shouted. Treasure chests were disappearing one after another, and everyone was in an anxious state. Schwa, Mantua fiercely turned around. Although she was still wearing the clothes of a maid, the aura around her was as terrifying as purgatory. She lifted a hand and clenched her fist. The cultivator's head exploded, and the headless corpse wildly vomited blood before it fell to the ground. The ship fell deathly silent. No one thought that this seemingly delicate maid would actually dare to kill someone, and moreover, kill them so easily. "Damn it, all of you deserve to die." Mantua's eyes rapidly turned blood red. She lifted a hand and took out a spear. It was transparent, and one could clearly see drops of blood floating within. Everyone's eyes fell onto the sphere. For some unknown reason, their hearts shrank as a great fear rose in them. "What is this thing? Hand it over." Mantua's delicate fingers clenched together, and the sphere loudly shattered. All the drops of blood within were directly shattered into nothingness. On the ship, all the cultivators froze in place. They maintained their final movements, but their vitality had already dissipated. Shuhi shouted, "Stop, what are you doing?" Mantua remained expressionless, but the blood-red light in her eyes became even brighter. "Don't speak. I am in a very bad mood right now. If I can't bear it, you will also die." Her eyes suddenly sharpened. With a flick of her sleeves, the angry Shu, he froze in place, and his eyes dimmed. She quickly stepped forward. She squatted down and traced her finger across the deck. A drop of blood in her rage. She had already destroyed the soul bead. All the cultivators who had touched this drop of blood should have their souls extinguished. But since this drop of blood hadn't shattered, in other words, its owner was still alive. It was the person who took the chest. Mantua placed her finger in her mouth, and her complexion changed. She lifted her hand and slammed it against her chest, causing her chest to sink. She spat out several mouthfuls of blood. As it fell onto the deck, it rapidly turned black and filled with a corrosive strength. With a sizzling sound, white smoke rose up. Even so, she still couldn't force out the poison that had invaded her body. Mantua's face rapidly swelled up, turning black and purple. Then her flesh and blood began to rot. Chunks of it fell to the ground, and thick blood emitted a nauseating stench. Mantua fell into the pool of blood. Her body twitched, and she screamed like a demon. It's you. I will never let you go. I will never!" Shuhi's eyes shined as if he couldn't see what was happening in front of him. He smiled and said, "Everyone, the mission has been completed. We will return now." The ship turned around and followed the path it came from, soon vanishing into the fog. In a corner of the palace, Chinyu sat down cross-legged. Countless treasure chests were placed in front of him. Since he knew that there were stone beads inside, he naturally wouldn't let them go. He could only consider them as repayment for the little maid. She had to pay a price for scheming against him. But he didn't know whether or not she could bear this price. Suddenly, he looked up in the direction of the crack. His dripping blood had actually been touched by someone. He hoped that this person's poison resistance attribute was better. Otherwise, if he died to a drop of blood, that person would surely feel aggrieved. Within his soul space, Mimi cheered out loud. It broke open. But soon her voice weakened. "I'm so tired. I'm so pitiful. I haven't recovered my strength to begin with, and now I have to be ordered around by others." Qin Yu was speechless. He coughed and said, "All right, if there is a chance in the future, I will definitely make it up to you." Mimi's spirits immediately rose. "Remember your words." A light mark appeared on Qin Yu's palm. He reached out and placed his hand on the treasure chest. Kacha! With a light sound, the chest opened. Looking inside, Qin Yu smiled. This chest was filled with stone beads. Although there weren't any high-grade beads, there was enough of them to make up for the lack of quality. With a flick of his sleeves, he put away all the stone beads. Then he took out a second chest and opened it. This sort of feeling was indescribably refreshing. Kacha! 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 The open chest soon piled up into a small hill. Of course, this wasn't the main point. The harvest of stone beads filled Qin Yu's heart with emotion. Even if there weren't any other harvests, just these stone beads were amazing enough. But there were always surprises. In the next dozen or so chests, there were actually high-grade beads. Qin Yu suddenly thought of those white altars and the chests with the high-grade beads. They were all things he had collected later on. He rubbed his temples, suddenly feeling his heart ache. If he had been any slower, he would have been able to obtain even more high-grade beads. Now that the chests had been forcefully dismantled, He didn't need to think to know that they were useless. Hashtag, 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 hashtag. Chapter 632. But as he thought about it, these stone beads had all been taken away in passing. The ones who would feel heartache should be the 3 Unity Trade Association. Qin Yu's thoughts immediately cleared up. After losing an entire ship of stone beads, they shouldn't be willing to give up. He muttered to himself before suppressing these thoughts. Since he had already done it, it was impossible for him to return it. He could do whatever he wanted. With the intensity of Qin Yu's will, he could disregard the dangers brought about by the walking corpses. But the horrors of the fog sea weren't limited to the walking corpses. After obtaining such a large number of spirit stones, it would be inexcusable if he didn't use them to cultivate. Looking around, Qin Yu nodded with satisfaction. With a flick of his sleeves, the boxes that had been casually thrown to the side piled up in front of him. They formed a semicircular wall that separated a corner of the hall into a small, independent space. There was no need to say anything else. Cultivation was more important. Light flashed, and a pile of stone beads appeared in front of Qin Yu. He lifted a hand and picked one up, an intoxicated expression on his face. A burning hot current gushed out from the stone bead, directly fusing into his body. Qin Yu could clearly feel his will slowly rising. After several breaths of time, there was a light cracking sound as the stone bead disintegrated into powder. Without any delay, Qin Yu picked up a second stone bead. Pa, 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 subtle and clear sounds constantly echoed out in the fog-filled hall. It was like a squirrel hiding in a tree hole, happily enjoying a feast of pine nuts. It was only when the 37th stone bead turned to powder that Qin Yu felt his will swell. He had reached his absorption limit. He put away the remaining stone beads and closed his eyes. In the world of his mind, a figure could be seen running forwards. The surface of this figure was wrapped in golden flames. As it ran, it was slowly absorbed and fused together. Qin Yu was completely immersed in his cultivation. He didn't discover that deep within the fog-covered hall, there was a statue whose eyes were gradually emitting a blood-red light. This statue had 6 arms, each one holding a weapon. It had a single eye and sharp fangs, and as the blood-red light appeared in its eyes, it began to absorb the fog within the hall. As the fog constantly fused in, the aura emitted by the statue rapidly rose. It was just that there was an invisible shackle on the surface of the statue that suppressed its aura to a small area, preventing it from spreading out. Shwa! Qin Yu's eyes flashed open. A crystalline light flashed through them, and he smiled. Indeed, the stone bead was the most suitable cultivation resource for him. In a short time, his will had improved significantly. As he silently calculated the number of stone beads he had, his smile became even brighter. But right at this moment, he seemed to have noticed that something was off. He frowned slightly and looked around with rapt attention. The great hall was incomparably quiet. There was no change from before. No, there was a change. The fog thinned. He had not noticed it before, but now that he paid attention, he could clearly see the changes in the fog. There was a loud cracking sound coming from deep within the hall. For some unknown reason, Qin Yu's mind began to race. It was as if some kind of terrible danger was about to descend. Starting from the first strike, the sound of shattering grew louder and faster, like broken porcelain. Then it was followed by the sound of shards falling to the ground and shattering again. Qin Yu's expression became dignified. He stood up and looked deep into the hall. His gaze pierced through the thin fog, and he seemed to see a mass of blood-red light. Hum! His ears instantly buzzed, and his eyes turned sour. Tears immediately gushed out uncontrollably. Roar! A deep and low roar sounded out, as if it came from the depths of hell. It carried with it an endless aura of annihilation, instantly flooding the entire hall. Qin Yu suddenly stepped forwards and shot into the skies. In the next moment, the ground where he had been standing was smashed apart from the inside. It was an ancient bronze spear covered in rust. The tip was still faintly trembling, emitting faint humming sounds. Qin Yu's complexion was dignified. He could feel a threat from the ancient bronze spear. It wasn't absolute strength, but some sort of aura it contained. Before he could think further, there was a loud rumble from deep within the hall. It was like something heavy had fallen to the ground, followed by the sound of heavy footsteps approaching. In the mist, the mass of blood quickly became clear. It was actually an eyeball between the eyebrows. Fangs protruded from its lips, and white mist came out as it panted. 6 thick and powerful arms were neatly arranged on both sides of its body. The only free arm suddenly grasped forwards. The ancient bronze spear that had drilled out from the ground held back into its hand. "You remnant of the war race, die!" A deep roar came from the statue's chest, shaking the air and causing rumbling sounds to echo out. The blood-red light in the statue's eye brightened, and it shot out like an arrow. Facing this blood-red light, Qin Yu frowned. He instinctively felt a sense of loathing. He lifted a hand and punched out. A terrifying strength swept out like a raging river. Before the blood-red light could approach his body, it was shattered. The strength of this punch didn't stop at all. It continued to roar forwards. The statue's arm that held the sledgehammer suddenly tightened and punched forwards. Bang! The sledgehammer flew out of the statue's hand. It spun several times in the air before smashing into the ground, creating a deep pit. Cracks appeared on the statue's arm, rapidly spreading upwards until the entire arm was covered in rubble. But before these rubble could fall to the ground, it was pulled back by an invisible strength. A new arm condensed, and the sledgehammer flew back into its hand. In the blink of an eye, the statue was restored to its original state. Qin Yu frowned. In his eyes, this statue wasn't too strong, and destroying it would be easy. But what he didn't expect was that it possessed an astonishing self-repairing ability. It was the fog in the hall. As the statue was restoring itself, the surrounding fog suddenly thinned. This wasn't able to hide from his eyes. He took a step forwards, and the ground instantly collapsed. Countless cracks spread outwards, and a terrifying shockwave spread outwards at a speed visible to the naked eye. Strong winds rose up, stirring up the fog and wildly pushing outwards, causing the area around the statue to become blank. Qin Yu's foot landed on the ground. Strength erupted, flowing up his waist and finally fusing into his arm as he punched forwards. The statue's 6 arms raised in front of it. In the next moment, its body fiercely trembled. A wild strength pierced through it, causing ripples in the air. Countless cracks appeared, covering every inch of the statue. With a loud crash, it fell to the ground, turning into rubble and scattering weapons. These rubble violently trembled, wanting to fuse back together. But without the fusion of fog, it was clearly impossible to do so. Qin Yu frowned. He lifted his foot and stomped downwards. His strength erupted once more, sending the fog flying away once more. This happened several times, but no fog was able to fuse in. The trembling rubble gradually fell silent. It was like 10,000 years had passed in a single breath of time. The weapons in the statue's hands rotted away and were destroyed. It was only now that the statue was killed. Not only did Qin Yu not feel happy, but he revealed a dignified expression. His intuition told him that these statues were another formidable threat in the fog. When he had hurried to collect the treasure chest, Qin Yu had shuttled through the palace. He had vaguely seen many similar statues. If these statues were the same as the one in front of him, then things would be troublesome. Moreover, this was only a relatively remote corner of the palace. Who knew if there were even more terrifying statues in the more important areas? Fog, corpses, statues. Just what secrets were hidden in this palace? Suddenly, Qin Yu's complexion changed. He submerged his feet into the fog and quickly left this place. Not long after he vanished, the fog in the hall violently tumbled and several figures walked out. They were actually several tall statues. looking at the rubble on the ground after the statues were killed. These statues angrily roared out and turned to leave. Qin Yu heard the angry roars coming from behind him. His complexion darkened. It seemed that his guess was correct. There was more than one statue that could revive, and they seemed to be able to sense each other. This was far too terrifying. In order to kill a single statue just now, he had expended a great deal of effort. If a group of them came, just thinking about it made him shudder. But the more it was like this, the more it proved that there was an enormous secret hidden within this towering palace. If he could unravel it, there would surely be a great harvest. Shwa! Qin Yu's figure flashed, and he vanished into the billowing fog. Something major had happened to the 3 United Trade Association. All the stone beads on the ship had been stolen by a cultivator that had infiltrated the ship. This was terrifying, but what was even more terrifying was that this cultivator actually had the ability to move about in the bewildering fog sea. It had to be known that to the cultivators of the sealed stone world, the bewildering fog sea was a place they wanted to enter the most, but they couldn't approach it. For a time, the attention paid to this matter even surpassed that of the 3 United Trade Association and the robbery of the stone beads. It was also because of this that the 3 United Trade Association obtained a short period of breathing space. Those great figures that had smuggled goods on the ship began to issue ultimatums to the Trade Association. If they could capture this mysterious cultivator, then the matter of the stone beads being stolen would be forgotten. Otherwise, the 3 United Trade Association would be beyond redemption. Even if there were several great figures standing behind the Trade Association, even if they joined forces, they wouldn't be able to withstand the anger of so many people. Moreover, the 3 United Trade Association was also very interested in this damned mysterious person. Temporarily suspend all activities, gather all masters, and board the ship to the bewildering fog sea. Capture him at all costs. If he's alive, I want to see him. If he's dead, I want to see his corpse. Mantua obtained a chance to redeem herself. Her entire body was wrapped in white cloth, revealing only a pair of hateful eyes that emitted a chill that left one panic-stricken and desperate. When they returned to the 3 United Trade Association, Mantua had already fainted in a pool of blood. She was immediately taken away to be resuscitated. Besides the few people that had personally come into contact with her, no one knew what sort of injuries she had suffered. Naturally, no one knew that beneath the white cloth was a body that was riddled with holes. Large areas of scars and flesh that had already healed were covered in blue and purple flesh. Just looking at it made one want to vomit. But as long as she could smoothly find the person she wanted, the 3 United Trade Association would help her find a body that perfectly suited her. To Mantua, this was both a battle for revenge and the only hope she had to continue living. Chapter 633. Qin Yu was finally able to confirm that in this towering divine palace, there were an innumerable number of statues. Perhaps it was because he had killed a statue, but once these statues discovered his aura, they would awaken from their deep slumber. In order to avoid their pursuit, Qin Yu constantly changed directions in the fog. Even if he found a temporarily safe place, he couldn't stay for too long. Although he could absorb the strength of the stone beads while moving, the efficiency would be greatly reduced. This left Qin Yu in a bad mood. In front of him was a square between palaces. Qin Yu tore open the fog and stepped inside. His complexion immediately darkened because to the side of the square there was a statue holding a broadsword. Besides the first time, Qin Yu hadn't truly fought with a statue again, but this didn't prevent him from determining the strength of a statue. Besides some special cases that he didn't know about, the larger a statue was, the more terrifying its strength was. The statue in front of him ranked in the top 3 of all the statues he had ever seen. Qin Yu turned and was about to leave, but at this time he frowned. It was strange. This statue didn't give him the slightest feeling of threat, as if it were truly a dead object. His thoughts stirred. Qin Yu stopped. He sensed that there was nothing wrong and then walked towards the statue. As he thought, the statue didn't respond at all. Sweeping his eyes around, he discovered that there was something different about it. The surface of this statue was covered in traces of corrosion, as if it had undergone a baptism of acid. Qin Yu's eyes brightened. He was currently being forced into a corner by these statues. If there was a strength here that could destroy these statues, then he could find a safe zone. The key right now was to confirm this point and see whether or not his guess was correct. Qin Yu's figure flickered, and he quickly moved along the edge of the square. A moment later, a second statue appeared in his line of sight. Like the first statue, its surface was also covered in traces of corrosion. Continuing forwards, Qin Yu circled around the square and returned to the starting point. In total, he found 8 stone statues around the square. Without exception, all of them had been severely corroded and had lost their strength. They had truly become piles of stone. His lips curved up in a smile. Now he could basically confirm his previous guess. The next step was to find the source of the corrosive strength. Qin Yu's final goal was to unravel the secrets of this towering divine palace. If he could find and grasp the strength that corroded the stone statues, it would undoubtedly be of great help to his future plans. He raised his head and looked around. The fog was boundless, and it was no different from other places. It was unknown how many years these statues had stood here for them to be corroded to their current state. Finding the source of the corrosion did not seem to be an easy task. Just as Qin Yu was at a loss for what to do, he suddenly frowned and turned to look outside the square. The fog tumbled. Then walking corpses began to appear. As they sensed Qin Yu's existence, they all revealed looks of awe. But what was different was that these corpses didn't leave like before. They just avoided Qin Yu and continued to pour into the square. Something was wrong. Qin Yu's thoughts raced. He stepped forwards and followed. In order to avoid scaring away these walking corpses, he maintained a certain distance and followed far behind. A moment later, they arrived at the center of the square. The corpses stopped and formed a circle. Qin Yu looked up. His gaze pierced through the fog, and he could faintly make out a massive stone building that resembled an arch. What are these zombies gathering there for? Could it be related to the corrosive strength of the statues? Qin Yu strode forwards. Feeling his approach, the walking corpses in front of him began to stir restlessly. They emitted deep roars. His complexion didn't change. His steps were steady and powerful, as if he didn't care about the threat of these walking corpses at all. Roar! With a loud roar, a walking corpse that looked like an old woman threw herself at him, her face fierce and fierce. Her 10 fingers instantly grew long blood-red nails. They tore through the air, emitting a grating sound. Qin Yu's eyes turned cold. He coldly coughed, and a formidable will broke out from his body, rumbling into the old woman's corpse. Her pouncing body suddenly froze, and then she held in pain. With a paw sound, her head was smashed into a pile of rotten flesh. Dong! A headless corpse fell to the ground. Qin Yu's icy cold eyes swept around. The walking corpses roared in fear and retreated, leaving behind a wide and straight path. Qin Yu quickly walked in. He wasn't worried at all about being surrounded by these walking corpses. He had already discovered their fatal weakness. These walking corpses had already been corroded by the fog and died. Because of their stubbornness, they were able to preserve nearly all of their strength from when they were alive. But they couldn't withstand the impact of a will that was too strong. Otherwise, what happened just now would have happened. Their heads would explode. With Qin Yu's current will, no matter how many walking corpses there were, they wouldn't be a threat. In fact, if he wanted to, he could even easily kill them. The reason why he held back and chose to scare them away was simple. The existence of these walking corpses made the bewildering fog see a forbidden zone that other cultivators couldn't enter. Only like this could no one compete with him for the lucky chances hidden within this divine palace. Qin Yu smoothly arrived at the center of the square. He discovered that what he saw before wasn't an arched door, but a stone building that resembled a fountain. What he thought was an arched door was actually the fountain's 4 outlets. Were the walking corpses surrounding them because of this fountain? Qin Yu suddenly took several steps forwards. He reached out a hand and touched the water outlet. His eyes flashed. As he thought, there was still a trace of moisture on the surface that hadn't yet dispersed. At this time, the sound of trickling water rose up. The walking corpses that were scared away began to stir restlessly. They wanted to rush over, but they feared Qin Yu and didn't dare to move. Qin Yu took a step back. Before determining the function of the fountain, he couldn't go wrong being a bit more cautious. As soon as he left, the walking corpses surrounded the fountain with a loud bang. The sound of flowing water became increasingly clear. On the surface of the stone building above the fountain, lines began to shine. Then, faint wisps of water, mist began to float out from the 4 outlets. It was extremely thin and light, like a drizzle in spring, sprinkling down in all directions. Qin Yu's pupils shrank. As the water mist fell onto the walking corpses, they revealed incomparably happy expressions. Some damaged areas began to rapidly repair, as if this water mist were extremely beneficial to the mortal body. But to Qin Yu, there was an even more important matter. He looked at the mist that was gradually drifting away. Although the vast majority of it was absorbed by the walking corpses, a small amount of water mist seemed to be attracted by some strength and flew towards the edge of the square. Shwa! Qin Yu rapidly drew back and soon returned to the edge of the square. He stood in front of a stone statue and quietly waited. Sure enough, the water mist flew over, causing the surface of the stone statue to become wet. Observing with rapt attention, Qin Yu soon determined that it was the water mist that was corroding the stone statue. Cautiously, Qin Yu hurried to the location of the second statue and then the third statue, thoroughly confirming this point. Then, just what was this water mist? Taking a deep breath, Qin Yu reached out a hand and pulled several wisps of water mist into his palm. A burning heat suddenly erupted, as if he had grabbed onto burning charcoal. But soon, that burning pain turned into a warm current that flowed into his body. Qin Yu sensed with rapt attention. After several breaths of time, he opened his eyes, a look of pleasant surprise on his face. This water mist was truly beneficial to the mortal body. Although it was only a few wisps of water mist, and with the intensity of his mortal body, he could clearly feel the energy contained within the water mist. Qin Yu suddenly understood why these dead walking corpses were able to survive until now. Perhaps it was because of this water mist. At this time, the water mist that drifted over from the center of the square rapidly thinned out. Perhaps the eruption of the fountain had ended. As he thought, he soon saw a massive number of walking corpses leaving. They avoided Qin Yu, vanishing into the boundless fog. Qin Yu's figure flickered, and he soon arrived at the center of the square. The fountain was already empty. He walked in front of the stone building and pressed his hand against it. He closed his eyes and focused his senses. But no matter how hard Qin Yu tried, he couldn't find anything wrong. He swept his divine sense underground, but didn't discover anything. Opening his eyes, he frowned, and a gloomy light shined in his eyes. But this clearly wasn't the case within his soul space. A cold fluctuation suddenly spread out. A faint purple moonlight appeared in the fog. They gathered together, condensed into a crescent moon, and landed on top of the fountain. Qin Yu revealed a happy expression. This was the first time that the purple moon had taken the initiative to help him. It seemed she had discovered something. A moment later, with a loud pop, the crescent moon vanished. A cold voice sounded out in his mind. The thing beneath the fountain is useful to me. Qin Yu frowned. It's also useful to me. After a brief silence, the purple moon continued to say, If you take away what I want, it will only be harmful. Qin Yu nodded. All right. Both sides reached an agreement. Within his soul space, the purple moon began to shine with a dazzling light. In this radiant purple moonlight, a tall and cold beauty stepped out. She wore palace robes, and her black hair hung down to her waist like a waterfall. Her expression was icy cold, but she was still so beautiful that it left one gasping for breath. She lifted a hand and drew in the void. Wherever her fingertips passed, a faint purple mark would be left behind, quickly forming a complex rune. The palace-robed woman lifted a hand, and the rune instantly faded away. At the same time, a cold voice sounded out. Press the rune against the fountain, and the entrance will be opened. Qin Yu looked down at his palm. The faint purple rune appeared. He stepped forwards and pressed his hand down. The stone building beneath his palm trembled. Then, Qin Yu discovered that the ground beneath the fountain had become transparent. Like a layer of water, it clearly reflected a world that was completely the same as the one above. There was also a fountain and the same stone building. Without hesitation, Qin Yu stepped forwards. His body was like stone, and in the layers of ripples he vanished from sight. In the next moment, he appeared in the inverted world. Looking up, he could see the fountain outside. Chapter 634. A dignified aura was released from it, carrying with it a noble coldness that couldn't be profaned. It was like it stood above the highest heavens, overlooking the trillions of lives in the world. With just a glance, Qin Yu recognized the essence of this radiant crystal, godhood. Even with Qin Yu's willpower, he couldn't help but widen his eyes, his face filled with shock. This was because he never imagined he would see a complete godhood. It had to be known that this was the same as facing a god. Godhood was the status of a spiritual god. It contained all strength and might. Purple moonlight flashed in front of him, and a woman in palace dress appeared. She looked at the godhood in front of her, a complex expression on her face. Raising a god! This was Qin Yu's first time seeing Purple Moon's true form. He couldn't help but be moved by her beauty, but he soon composed himself. Purple Moon, do you know the origin of this palace? I don't. Her tone was faint. I just happened to do something similar to this. Qin Yu frowned. Raising a god? Purple Moon said, as you understand it, raising a spiritual god. Qin Yu's eyes widened. How is that possible? Purple Moon said, all existences in this world move from life to death. As long as they can live on, what is impossible? Qin Yu's thoughts wildly tumbled. In his understanding, spiritual gods represented transcendence. They were the pinnacle of a cultivator's cultivation and represented infinite strength. But Purple Moon's words overturned his imagination, revealing another cruel reality. Even spiritual gods weren't free. The so-called freedom was to ignore life and death and smile at the heavens and earth. Qin Yu's mouth was a bit dry. He subconsciously licked his lips and asked, You've raised a god before? Purple Moon nodded and then shook her head. I've experienced raising a god, but I've never let it. She paused for a moment and then continued, Spiritual gods possess great might, and they themselves are great karma. Once they face death, the heavens and earth will descend to destroy them. To preserve their godhood and prevent their divinity from falling is an extremely difficult matter. She glanced at Qin Yu, the meaning in her eyes unclear. Qin Yu took a deep breath. The greater the price, the greater the harvest, right? Purple Moon said, If you successfully raise a god, you can control a portion of the god's power. As you can see, this god's power is to repair and strengthen the mortal body. Qin Yu earnestly asked, Purple Moon, do I have the qualifications to raise a god? Purple Moon said no. She didn't hide it at all. She looked up at the godhood. After so many years, this godhood has lost its divinity and is on the verge of collapse. Purple Moon didn't speak any further. She looked up at the godhood. Endless years have passed, and without any strength to supplement it, this godhood has already lost its divinity and is on the verge of collapse. However, it has other uses for me. I will take away the godhood, and the rest will belong to you. Qin Yu nodded. All right. Purple Moon lifted her hand and grasped forward. This dazzling rhombus-shaped godhead suddenly emitted light cracking sounds. Then it broke into countless small pieces that were wrapped up by purple moonlight and vanished. God, and of a million. And people could only people, they, and it. God, soul, and you above. Feel. Purple moon said, it contains a great deal of strength. With the strength of your mortal body, you shouldn't completely absorb it all at once. Chin. Turned, returned to. Chin. Of. Chin. As. Chin. Of. I. Be. Be. Of. Bang. In that moment, Chin Yu felt a raging flame ignite within his body. The blazing heat caused him to stuffily cough as his skin turned crimson red. The rolling heat was like flowing magma, penetrating his flesh and bones all the way to his internal organs and bones. He felt as if he had been placed in a furnace, suffering and torment. But there was a look of excitement on his face. Within his mind, a gigantic figure reared his head back and roared. This was the legacy of the ancient race. It could clearly sense the good fortune that Chin Yu was experiencing right now. This was a comprehensive increase in his mortal body, making him stronger, more tenacious, and even more resistant. After 2 hours, the raging heat within Chin Yu's body began to gradually subside. The black robe on his body was already soaked in black sweat that was gushing out of his pores, emitting a foul stench. In these years, Chin Yu had been injured countless times. Although he quickly recovered afterwards, there were still some injuries that remained. 1 or 2 spots were not obvious, but if there were too many of them, it would become a huge hidden danger. This hidden danger was currently hidden, but once Chin Yu's cultivation made a breakthrough in the future and he reached the Great Tao realm, it would erupt and become the greatest obstacle preventing him from transforming into a great Tao body. Since ancient times, countless proud sons of heaven had spent a great deal of effort and time in order to achieve a great Tao body. But now, by relying on the half-drop of green liquid left behind by the divine spark, Chin Yu had already swept away all the obstacles preventing him from transforming into a great Tao body. This was because there were 2 most difficult points in forming a great Tao body. The other point was the beginning. But Chin Yu had already formed a partial great Tao body many years ago. Even if it was just a finger, that was more than enough. As long as his cultivation broke into the great Tao realm, Chin Yu would be able to naturally form a great Tao body. Of course, Chin Yu didn't know about these enviable harvests, but as he focused his mind and sensed the improvement of his mortal body, it was enough to fill him with joy. The mist that sprayed out from the fountains was the strength released by the divine spark after it had been diluted countless times. Even so, it was still able to keep the bodies of countless walking corpses in perfect condition. Chin Yu directly absorbed the origin liquid. There was no need to describe the effects. Right now, there was only one thought in his mind. Continue, continue, continue. He absorbed the remaining half-drop. Chin Yu had an intuition that once he completely absorbed it, his mortal body would reach a whole new boundary. He lifted a hand and took out the jade box. After opening it, Chin Yu paused. He stared at the half-drop of green liquid, his complexion changing for a long time. Finally, he used his formidable willpower to close the jade box. He closed his eyes and took several deep breaths, barely managing to suppress his tumbling emotions. The mist could erode the stone statues and make them lose their threat. The effects of the green liquid would only be better. Leaving it on his body was far more useful than directly absorbing it. But even though he understood this, doing this was still a tremendous torment for Chin Yu. The temptation of the green liquid was 100 times, 1,000 times stronger than drugs. If it weren't for his will being firm and powerful enough, he wouldn't have been able to resist the powerful desire to swallow it. This was especially true after he learned of the astonishing effects of the green liquid. With a bitter smile, Chin Yu put away the jade box. He feared that if he continued to look at it, he wouldn't be able to help himself and would swallow it whole. He had to do something to divert his attention. Qin Yu swept his eyes around. After the divine spark was taken away, this reflection world was still perfectly preserved. It didn't seem as if it would be destroyed. As a place to cultivate, it should be safe enough. Moreover, Qin Yu needed time to adapt and master his improved mortal body. Qin Yu sat down cross-legged and took out a pile of stone beads. He lifted a hand and a flow of heat immediately gushed out. The three United Trade Associations ship sailed into the fog sea once more. As it arrived outside the towering divine palace, figures stood up one after another, their expressions dignified. Montua was wrapped in white cloth. Her voice was icy cold to the bone. Everyone here is an absolutely trusted elite of the trade association. Thus you have the qualifications to participate in today's matters. I will not repeat any unnecessary arrangements. I only hope that everyone will remember our mission. She swept her eyes over everyone. No matter the cost, find that person and bring him back alive. Whoosh, whoosh. Masters of the three United Trade Association held into the fog. They followed the cracks in the palace and flew into the towering divine palace. Montua was the last to disembark. Shu He, steer the ship around here. If he wants to leave, this is the only exit. Shu He smiled. Don't worry. With me here, he can forget about escaping. Watching Montua vanish into the fog, Shu He faintly smiled. After waiting for so many years, the chance has finally arrived. Take them as sacrifices, and I will definitely be able to revive. Three United Trade Association, this is what you owe me. As he spoke, his smile didn't change, but his entire body emitted a horrifying and gloomy aura. The ship turned around and sailed into the fog sea, vanishing from sight. In the square between the palaces, where the fountain was, looking around, one could see countless walking corpses filling their line of sight. They eagerly stared at the fountain. The mist that should have sprayed out long ago had yet to appear. This caused the walking corpses to instinctively become restless. Deep and low roars constantly echoed out. The entire square was like a volcano that could erupt at any moment. At this time, a cultivator appeared at the edge of the square. He was clearly carrying some sort of treasure that could conceal his aura. If he didn't make a sound, he would be nothing more than a shadow. Hearing the roars of the walking corpses coming from the square, the cultivator froze, panic in his eyes. He finally understood why the number of walking corpses he encountered today had decreased so much. It was because they were all gathered here, just what was happening in the square. After a moment of hesitation, the cultivator dispelled any thoughts of entering the square. His mission was to find someone, so it was best not to take risks. Otherwise, if he made a mistake, the consequences would be unbearable. As this person turned to leave, the roars of the walking corpses echoed out from the square. Unlike before, they were filled with fear. The cultivator's complexion changed. He took out a crystal ball and crushed it without hesitation. His entire body was like a phantom that was being erased, rapidly vanishing from sight. Soon, a figure walked out from the square. It was a complete coincidence that this person had left in the same direction. Qin Yu quickly walked over. He hadn't noticed anything at first, but his sudden appearance had clearly surpassed someone's expectations, causing his aura to fluctuate. Qin Yu's feet paused. He lifted a hand and grasped forwards. The fog collapsed inwards, and the screaming cultivator appeared. Qin Yu swept his eyes around, his gaze icy cold. Three Amalgamation Trade Association. As he thought, it was just as he thought. These people wouldn't give up so easily. But he never imagined that the Three Amalgamation Trade Association would dare to chase him all the way here. Qin Yu never imagined that he would become a fragrant cake. That was the focus of so much attention. His thoughts raced, and he pulled the cultivator in front of him. Speak. How many people came from the Three Amalgamation Trade Association? The Three Amalgamation Trade Association cultivator had a fierce expression. You want to obtain information from me? Keep on dreaming. Is that so? Qin Yu's eyes brightened. He stared into the cultivator's eyes, and a powerful will pierced through his mind. Tell me everything you know. The Three Amalgamation Trade Association cultivator said, There's 64 of us here in total, all of the masters of the trade association. Our goal is to find you and bring you back. Qin Yu frowned. Find me? Not to kill me? The Three Amalgamation Trade Association cultivator said, We won't kill you because the trade association wants to know just how you managed to survive in the bewildering fog sea. Qin Yu understood everything in the blink of an eye. No wonder they invested so much capital. His eyes flashed. He glanced at the square behind him, and a thought suddenly appeared in his mind. After quickly thinking it over and making sure there wasn't anything wrong, Qin Yu's lips curved up in a cold smile. Now, tell them that you have found me. Have everyone from the Three Amalgamation Trade gather in this square. The Three Amalgamation Trade Association cultivator nodded. All right. He took out a jade archive and placed it between his eyebrows, pouring his divine sense into it. In an instant, the information was transmitted out. He laid down the jade archive and said, I've already informed them. Qin Yu nodded. Very good. Follow me. He turned and walked into the square. The Three Amalgamation Trade Association cultivator followed. The two soon arrived outside the fountain. You stay here and wait for them to come. Qin Yu opened the reflection world and stepped inside. Within the towering divine palace, all the cultivators from the Three Amalgamation Trade Association received the message, and all of them revealed happy expressions. If they had a choice, they wouldn't have wanted to come here. Although the Trade Association had given them a treasure to conceal their aura, that didn't guarantee that nothing would go wrong. In these past days, 7 masters of the Trade Association had disappeared without a trace. It was unknown what they experienced, but their fates could be predicted. Now, this torment could finally end. Once they caught that person, they could leave the bewildering fog sea and obtain the rewards of the Trade Association. Schwa, schwa. Cultivators from the Three Amalgamation Trade Association gathered towards the location of the message. In the thick fog, a white-clothed Mantua silently walked forwards. Her eyes were the only thing that was revealed, filled with a cold hatred. Although the Chamber of Commerce wanted him alive, she still had the means to get some interest from him first. Just you wait. I will definitely make you understand that sometimes living in this world is the greatest pain in life. Whoosh, Mantua sped up. The place she searched was far from the square. By the time she arrived, half a day had passed. Outside the square, almost all the cultivators from the Three Amalgamation Trade Association had gathered. As they saw her arrive, they all looked over. Mantua frowned. Where is he? A cultivator said, The location of the message is here. We sense that Wei Xian is in this square, but we don't know what the situation is like, so we don't dare to casually enter. Mantua nodded. It's right to be cautious, but with so many of us here, as long as we find him, he won't be able to escape. She turned and coldly said, Now follow me. Remember, no matter what happens, we cannot let him escape. Yes, a group of cultivators from the Three Amalgamation Trade Association rushed into the square. Mantua's complexion changed. She saw Wei Xian under the fountain and swept her eyes around. She coldly said, Where is he? Wei Xian looked up, the confusion in his eyes rapidly fading. As he saw Mantua and the others in front of him, he revealed a look of panic. Hurry and run, this is a trap. In the world of reflections, Qin Yu lightly said, It's already too late. He opened the jade box in his hand. Under his control, his aura spread out through the fountain. Chapter 635. Stimulated by the aura of the divine water, the walking corpses fell into a frenzied state. When they saw the people from the Three Unity Trade Association, a massacre was inevitable. Yes, a massacre. even though those that gathered here were tyrannical figures of the Three Unity Trade Association. Compared to the walking corpses, they were still far too weak. Cries of despair, moans of pain, the sounds of flesh tearing apart, the sounds of bones breaking gathered together, causing fear to rise from the depths of one's soul. The entire center of the square had become an azure hell. The walking corpses that couldn't find the divine water began to tear at their flesh and blood. It was as if they wanted to swallow their lives so that they could continue existing. In the reflected world, Qin Yu had a calm expression. The cruel scene that he had personally led to happen didn't move his heart at all. The world of cultivators was a world of cannibalism to begin with. If one didn't have thunderous methods and a callous heart, they would only harm themselves. Although the cultivators of the Three Unity Trade Association hadn't come to kill him, once he fell into their hands, he feared he would face a fate worse than death. Those that wanted to kill others could be killed. Mantua screamed, come out for me!" The white cloth wrapped around her had already been torn apart by the walking corpses, revealing her ugly body. She was like a ghost that had crawled out from hell. She was well aware that everything in front of her was a killing trap laid down by that damned man. He had borrowed the strength of the walking corpses to send all of them into the Yellow Springs. The most tragic and indignant matter in the world was to take revenge with complete confidence, only to end up as a chess piece in someone else's hands and not even be able to see the other side. Mantua was currently experiencing this feeling. Her heart was filled with hatred and madness, and she even suppressed the fear of death. She lifted a hand and pressed forwards. Black light erupted and black flower petals appeared, closing around the walking corpses in front of her. The petals wriggled and tightened. Crackling sounds came from within. Mantua's incomparably ugly face flushed red, and the aura she emitted became even stronger. "Ha ha ha! It won't be so easy to kill me. I will definitely find you and kill you." A cultivator of the Three Unity Trade Association approached, trying to obtain Mantua's protection. But what welcomed him was the ruthless swallowing of the black flower petals. "Die. You all deserve to die." Mantua's eyes were bloodshot. She didn't notice that wisps of mist were entering her body, causing the depths of her blood-red eyes to darken. The zombies attacking her frantically gave up on attacking her. Mantua screamed as she shuttled through the square, devouring all the zombies and cultivators of the Three United Chamber of Commerce in front of her. "Where are you? Come out." She had already gone mad, or to be more precise, she had already died. The only thing controlling this body now was a lingering obsession. Her hatred towards Qin Yu had overwhelmed everything else, causing her to become her current appearance. As the black petals crazily devoured her, her aura became increasingly strong. At the same time, the speed at which the mist fused into her body became faster and faster. The black flower was called Datura. It was rumored to be an evil flower that bloomed in hell. It obtained great power by devouring the flesh and blood of living beings. What Mandala had summoned was the projection of the Mandala flower. It could devour living beings and obtain great power for a short period of time. But this method was a taboo that wasn't permitted by the rules. In a normal state, she could only use it once. Any more, and she would suffer a backlash that would eventually destroy her. But now, within this towering divine palace, and with the mist entering her body, Mantua, who was on the brink of death, actually managed to break through the shackles of the rules. Now, she strangely possessed a nearly endless swallowing ability. Moreover, every time she swallowed a cultivator or walking corpse, her strength would increase accordingly. The blood-red color in her eyes became increasingly thick. At the same time, the darkness in the depths of her eyes became increasingly deep. It gave off a feeling as if gray pupils were growing out of her blood-red eyes. Mantua's current aura was even more terrifying than that of a true evil spirit. The walking corpses in the square all felt fear. They no longer cared about chasing down the cultivators of the three United Chamber of Commerce and began to flee. Kill! 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 As she screamed, Mantua sped up even more, playing the role of a cruel hunter. She was still searching for Chinyu, but influenced by her instincts, she began to deliberately swallow the cultivators and walking corpses in the square. Within the reflection world, Chinyu furrowed his eyebrows. This matter was indeed unexpected. If he allowed this to continue, Mantua would inevitably become stronger and stronger, even becoming a threat to him. With his thoughts set, Chinyu's eyes revealed a cold light. He stepped through the gap between worlds and arrived in the real world. Mantua suddenly stopped. Even though she was far away, she still instantly discovered the aura engraved in her mind. Above her head, the black datura flower wildly wriggled, swallowing up the flesh and blood within, transforming it into a formidable strength. "It's you!" With a loud cry, Mantua rushed out. The fog in front of her instantly exploded, spreading outwards and forming a straight channel. Chinyu had a dignified expression. Only when he faced her head-on could he truly feel just how terrifying this woman was. Darkness, despair, and annihilation crazily attacked his mind. If his will wasn't firm, he feared he would instantly collapse, allowing her to swallow and slaughter him. But to Chinyu, this wasn't able to affect him too much. He lifted a hand and punched out, causing the straight channel of fog to directly shatter. Then, the fog billowed outwards like a broken dam. With a loud rumble, its momentum shook the heavens and earth. "Ah!" Mantua screamed. The black datura flower bloomed, wrapping around her, and then she was sent flying away. There was no joy on Chinyu's face. Rather, his gaze became even more dignified. This was because his punch hadn't been able to cause much damage to Mantua. The black datura flower possessed an extremely potent defensive strength, able to offset most of Chinyu's strength. Bang! She crashed into the ground. The datura flower opened and Mantua flew out. Many of the ugly scars on her body had cracked open, but what was strange was that no blood flowed out from these wounds. In fact, as the fog constantly poured into her body, her wounds began to rapidly recover. This was an ability that only those stone statues had. In that moment, Chinyu's killing intent rose. He didn't know what had happened to Mantua, but he couldn't allow this woman to continue living. Otherwise, it was likely she would become a great threat to him. Chinyu stepped forwards and pounced forwards like a tiger. His flesh and blood rumbled, and his blood energy fluctuated, shaking the heavens and earth. At this time, he was like a million mountains descending upon him. A terrifying aura seemed as if it could crush the entire world into powder. His eyes brightened like stars in a clear winter night. A formidable will shot out like an arrow, actually tearing apart the fog. His will affected reality. This was a sign that it was about to solidify and transform into essence. It represented the absolute terror of his will. Mantua seemed to feel a threat. She opened her mouth and screamed, but in the next moment she seemed to be pierced by an arrow. She looked up and her entire body bent like a bow. In the next moment, Chinyu's fist arrived. The black datura flower protected its master, opening wide to swallow him. Chinyu didn't pause at all. He welcomed the blooming datura flower and rushed in. The petals instantly closed, wildly wriggling and contracting. But soon, a giant bulge appeared from within. Bang! A petal exploded. The datura flower emitted a pitiful cry. Thick blood gushed out from where it broke. Mantua's eyes flickered. In the final moment, she raised her hands in front of her. A heaven-shaking explosion, accompanied by the sound of flesh and bone breaking, made one's scalp tingle. Mantua's entire body was sent flying away. A wild strength crazily rampaged through her body. All of her skin cracked apart, connecting together as if it would cut her to pieces. After withstanding Chinyu's fist, the flesh and blood of her arms completely disintegrated, revealing the pale, white bones underneath. They had already broken into countless pieces. She crashed into the ground. The hard ground of the square instantly shattered, as if she had been torn apart by a hard plow. Rumble, rumble. In the horrifying sound waves, Montoa's body nearly pierced through the entire square, causing a straight crack to appear in the ground. Like a thick brush stroke, it fell down from the heavens, splitting the world in half. Leaning against the ground, Montoa's aura had nearly completely dissipated. The flesh and blood of her entire back had been ground away. Looking through the cracks in her bones, one could clearly see her shattered organs. She looked up at Chinyu, the blood-red light in her eyes extremely dim. "I will kill you. I will definitely kill you." Chinyu stepped forwards, his expression cold. "It's over." He lifted a hand and pressed it down. The towering divine palace was vast, so vast that one couldn't see the end of it. But compared to the entire fog sea, it only occupied a tiny portion. He steered the ship forwards in the fog. After circling around the palace for a long time, he arrived in front of another common-looking crack. He stood at the bow of the ship. After carefully looking at it several times, excitement lit up his face. He suddenly fell to his knees and pressed his hands against the deck. A faint blood-red light appeared between his fingers, spreading outwards like ripples. Wherever it passed, bloodline-like markings appeared on the surface of the ship. Thump! Thump! A deep and low sound spread out from within the ship. It was like a beating heart that was awakening. The ship rapidly shrank. During this process, the parts that were refined and added to the ship began to break apart and fall off. In several breaths of time, the ship completely vanished, turning into motes of light that fell onto the back of Shuhi's hand. The image of a strange beast appeared. It reared its head back and roared. Light flowed in its eyes, as if it could revive at any moment. Shuhi took a deep breath and muttered, "Life or death, success or failure, it all depends on this." After enduring countless years of suffering, this day had finally arrived. He absolutely would not fail, absolutely not. Whoosh! He flew towards the divine palace. His figure drilled into the crack. It was extremely narrow inside, and there were many places that he had to carefully pass through. The walls of the divine palace were astonishingly thick. After dozens of miles, he finally reached the exit. He flew out, and his field of vision brightened. This was an astonishingly large palace. The walls and floor of the palace were all made from some kind of pure black crystal. It seemed as if a single glance could swallow a person's soul and imprison them. The palace was astonishingly large. Standing within it, a person was as small as an ant. In the center of the palace, there was a thick stone pillar that shot into the skies. He stepped forwards and flew upwards along the stone pillar. He could clearly see the top of the palace, but he still couldn't reach the end of the stone pillar. It was like he had been walking in place this entire time. Shuhi's expression was calm, as if he didn't realize his current predicament. His flight lasted for an entire hour, and he had probably flown hundreds of thousands or even millions of kilometers. If he looked down, he could clearly see the floor of the palace. If he looked up, the top of the palace was in front of him, but it was also unreachable. After another hour, he felt his body pass through an invisible, water-like barrier. Shuhi's eyes brightened. He had finally reached the end of the stone pillar. A pure white altar was built at the top of the stone pillar. There wasn't the least bit of other colors on it, and it exuded a pure and holy aura. "Pa!" He landed in front of the altar. Looking at the surface of the altar, he could clearly see his own reflection. He finally couldn't suppress the excitement in his heart. "I knew that there would be a day when I would return here and obtain a new life." He lifted his hand, and the strange beast image on the back of his hand lit up. "You and I were both harmed by others. Today, we will be resurrected in the midst of blood and slaughter. We will make those who betrayed us, those who harmed us, pay the price they deserve." Bang! Blood-red flames suddenly ignited, wrapping around Shuhi. He roared out loud, "I will sacrifice all of them as repayment. Give me back my life!" Hum! Strange beast phantoms appeared above his head. They opened their mouths and spat out auras. They flew onto the altar and turned into figures. These people were the cultivators of the 3 Unity Trade Association that had boarded the ship to enter the bewildering Fog Sea. But at this time, something unexpected occurred. The figures formed from auras burst apart like bubbles and dissipated. Beneath the blood-red flames, Shuhi roared out, "Impossible!" He couldn't accept what had happened in front of him. For the sake of today, he had painstakingly tormented himself. He only had one chance. Now that he had made his move, he had failed before he even started. He absolutely couldn't allow such a result. "Ah!" Shuhi screamed, but suddenly his pupils shrank. This was because above the altar there were still several figures that hadn't been destroyed. One of them was particularly clear, and it was surrounded by faint traces of black energy. Montua! Shuhi lifted a hand and opened it. In the next moment, his fingers exploded and blood gushed out. After it left his fingertips, it disintegrated and turned into a blood fog. As if attracted by an invisible strength, the blood fog fused into the Montua phantom above the altar. Blood vessels appeared, spreading through her entire body in the blink of an eye. Then, she turned from nothingness into reality. Blood-red eyes fell on Shuhi. Montua said in a soft voice, "Thank you." Square. He slowly drew back his fist. In front of him was a bottomless black hole, and Montua, who had originally been at the position of the black hole, had vanished from sight. Who had saved her? The aura that descended just now was evil and cold, as if it had been buried underground for countless years. He closed his eyes, and his divine sense erupted, sweeping out like a hurricane. After a long time, Chinyu opened his eyes, a gloomy expression on his face. There was no trace of her, as if she had evaporated into thin air. Chinyu's frown deepened. He suddenly felt that this palace in front of him was even more mysterious. He took a deep breath and soon composed himself. Although he hadn't been able to kill Montua, this wasn't important to him. If it weren't for the fact that he wanted to solve this problem in one go and that he just happened to have a suitable method, he wouldn't have placed those people from the 3 Unity Trade Association in his eyes. Finding the stone bead and unraveling the secrets of this palace was the most important matter. If she escaped, then she escaped. If she didn't appear again, that would be for the best. Otherwise, he would just have to kill her again. Qin Yu's figure moved, leaving the square. He submerged into the thick fog and continued to explore the unknown range of the divine palace. In the depths of the Sealing Stone Nebula, every sealing stone was inconceivably large. It was like a floating, ancient, divine mountain. On one of the sealing stones, there was a massive and luxurious palace built. In the main hall, 3 figures sat around a round table. The tea on the table was steaming hot, emitting a tantalizing fragrance. If someone with a lower cultivation were to take a single breath, they would explode from the strength contained within the tea. True peak existences, no matter where they were, had the qualifications to live a life that ordinary people couldn't even imagine. But right now, none of the 3 people in the hall were in the mood to enjoy this incomparably precious spirit tea. They allowed the tea's strength to dissipate in vain. An invisible suppressive strength caused the air to fall silent, as if it were a block of transparent ice. But this silence would eventually be broken. In the main seat facing the entrance, an old man in a purple-striped robe slowly said, "Those that entered the Fog Sea have all died. 64 masters, the weakest of them were Peak Blue Sea and even half-step Tribulation Immortals." But they were nothing in his words. This was a nearly closed-off environment. Over the endless years, a massive number of masters had gathered here. Those that weren't at the Tribulation Immortal realm weren't worth paying attention to. The silver-haired, middle-aged man on the left had a grim expression. borrowing the walking corpses to slaughter the cultivators of the Chamber of Commerce. It can be seen that this person has the strength to deter the walking corpses. Is it because of an external object? Or is it because of him? The last person said, "No matter what the reason is, we must obtain it. Without the walking corpses restricting us and avoiding those stone statues, we might have a chance to uncover the secrets of the fog sea." The old man in the purple-striped robe revealed a thoughtful expression. "I am only worried that our actions will arouse the attention of the echelon existences." The silver-haired, middle-aged man sneered. "What are you afraid of? They were just lucky to arrive earlier than us. If we really fight them, we might not be afraid of them." The last person said, "Even so, we still need to be cautious. Don't forget that cold fire that died not too long ago. He was trying to break into the echelon, but then he died without even knowing why." The silver-haired, middle-aged man stood up. "If we don't go all out, you and I will never have the chance to step into the echelon. If you are afraid, I will do it myself." The old man waved his hand. "Silver King is right. We will have to fight sooner or later. There is no reason to miss this opportunity." He looked at the last person. "I will join." After several breaths of silence, the last person said, "All right." On the pure white altar, blood-red flames wildly burned. Montua was wrapped up in broken datura flowers. She recklessly laughed. "You will never be able to kill me, but as long as you agree to a condition of mine, I will give up resisting and allow you to complete the sacrifice." "Shu," he said in a low voice, "speak." Montua lifted a hand. Black energy wove together in the blood-red flames, revealing Qin Yu's figure. "Find him and then use the cruelest method in the world to kill him." Shuhi nodded. "All right, I agree." Chapter 636. The deeper he went into the divine palace, the more stone statues there were. But because the green divine water concealed Chinyu's aura, or because the stone statues feared its strength, Chinyu was able to temporarily rid himself of the stone statue's threat. It was clear that his decision to suppress the temptation and leave behind the divine water was the correct one. And most importantly, after removing the threat of the stone statues, the entire divine palace no longer posed any danger to Chinyu. He could calmly walk through the divine palace, exploring it bit by bit and uncovering its hidden secrets. In a slightly smaller palace, Chinyu stood in front of a stone statue. As he looked at the skeleton that had fallen to the ground, he revealed a dignified expression. After entering the bewildering fog sea, he had seen many corpses, but this was the first time he had seen such a rotten corpse. Of course, the reason he was so cautious was because the skeleton gave him a very different feeling. Even though it was already dead, and all that was left over were pale white bones, it still emitted an extremely sharp and fierce aura. It was like an unsheathed sword that pointed towards the heavens, wanting to pierce a hole in the heavens. Every bone had some kind of strange pattern. They started from the bones of the feet and went all the way up along the bones of the legs. With the spine as the channel, they continued to radiate to both sides, covering all the ribs on both sides. Finally, they entered the head from the cervical vertebrae and converged on the brow bone. Although Chinyu didn't know what these lines represented, he instinctively felt awe with his current cultivation and will. Anything that could cause him to feel awe in his heart wasn't ordinary at all. After a moment of hesitation, Chinyu stood in front of the skeleton. He cupped his hands together and then flicked his sleeves, taking the skeleton away. After carefully looking around the hall and finding nothing else, Chinyu turned and left. But just as he stepped out of the hall, a deep rumbling sound came from the distance. Then the fog in front of him began to tumble and tumble like waves. Strong winds blew against his face, causing Chinyu to narrow his eyes. He lifted a hand and slowly opened it, his eyes instantly brightening. Stone bead. What he grasped in his palm was a low-grade stone bead. Without hesitation, Chinyu took a step forward and held outwards. A powerful aura tumbled around him, shattering the fog around him. Qin Yu revealed a bit of excitement. His fundamental goal in coming to the bewildering fog sea was to obtain a stone bead to enhance his will. Now he had finally discovered it. Whoosh! Another stone bead, wrapped in fog, held towards him. Qin Yu lifted a hand to grab it, but at this time his eyebrows arched up and 2 fingers of his other hand caught a blue leaf. It was ordinary, and the patterns on its surface were clear. It could be seen everywhere in the outside world, but this was the sealed stone world. Besides stone, there was nothing else here. There are actually plants in this palace. Qin Yu grasped the leaf and sped up. After a moment, he came to a stop with 6 stone beads in his hands. In front of him was the entrance to a magnificent palace. The palace door had been broken by some kind of power, leaving only half of the door hanging above. The gale came from the depths of this palace. Qin Yu looked over with rapt attention. Indeed, beneath the broken palace gates, he found some stone beads that had been blocked, as well as several green leaves. Right here. However, entering the palace was not a simple matter. 12 huge stone statues stood at the sides of the palace gates. Their sudden appearance was completely incompatible with their surroundings. It was obvious that they had been moved here later. Besides the stone statues, there were also countless walking corpses. They wandered around the palace gates, looking up from time to time as if they were begging for something. Sensing the sudden arrival of a strange aura, the walking corpses all turned their heads. Pairs of gray eyes made one's scalp tingle. Roar! As they roared, the walking corpses revealed fierce expressions. Qin Yu remained expressionless. His formidable will erupted, causing the tumbling fog to become even more chaotic. It was like an invisible hurricane swept through the world, causing all the walking corpses to stiffen. Then they began to howl in fear. All of them drew back in panic, the fierce expressions on their faces turning into fear. Among the walking corpses in front of him, there were several that had particularly powerful auras. If he couldn't suppress them with his will, then even Qin Yu would find it difficult to deal with them. This won't be easy. It was clear that this didn't include Qin Yu. The 12 stone statues had both humans and beasts, as well as other strange creatures. At this time, all of them were crazily absorbing the fog. Powerful fluctuations of aura erupted. Cracks appeared on the surface of the stone statues, and an oppressive aura descended. It was like a mountain falling on one's chest, making it difficult to breathe. Qin Yu's complexion was dignified. He hadn't tested facing 12 stone statues before. He lifted his hand, and a jade box appeared. He opened it to reveal green, divine water. With a thought, the aura of the divine water immediately spread out. Roar! The retreating walking corpses became restless once more. They paced back and forth, their powerful strength causing the ground to crack apart. The aura of the divine water had an incomparably powerful allure to them. A walking corpse with its chest split open and its organs half exposed suddenly howled and leapt forwards like a bolt of lightning. But before it could approach, it emitted a miserable scream. Its entire body seemed to be struck by an invisible hand, and it froze in midair. Bang! Its head exploded into pieces. Following that was a second, third, fourth walking corpse. The fear in their hearts was overcome by attraction. But without exception, all of them were easily killed. Qin Yu didn't even turn his head to look at the walking corpses. His eyes were focused on the awakening stone statues. If the divine water was useless, then facing the encirclement of 12 stone statues, he could only temporarily avoid them. Luckily, the scene Qin Yu worried about didn't occur. On the surface of the 12 stone statues, cracks began to appear at an increasingly slow rate until they finally stopped. Then these cracks began to mend. In the blink of an eye, they vanished and the stone statues returned to silence. Qin Yu didn't dare to put away the jade box. He stepped forwards and howled, passing through the 12 stone statues and entering through the palace gates. A long divine path appeared in his line of sight. On both sides of the divine path were stone beads. Although they were all low-grade, there were so many of them that Qin Yu's heart skipped a beat. They were buried in a thick layer of fallen leaves. Besides a small amount of fresh green on the surface, the rest had already turned yellow. Qin Yu pursed his lips. He continued forwards along the divine path until he saw 4 terrifying stone statues that were 10,000 feet tall. They stood in pairs, occupying the 4 corners of the world. The eyes of the stone statues emitted a rich blood-red light that gathered in midair and sprinkled down, forming an incomparably massive blood-red cage. But now these 4 stone statues were all damaged, and there were several holes on the surface of the blood-red cage. Although they weren't large, they were large enough for a cultivator to freely enter and exit. Qin Yu sensed with rapt attention. He didn't sense anything wrong. He stepped forwards and shot into the skies, flying towards one of the holes. Looking up, Qin Yu stiffened. His mouth subconsciously fell open, a look of shock on his face. He saw that within the space of the blood-red cage, there were actually several giant ancient trees growing. Their roots were exposed to the ground, twisting about like giant dragons. The canopy of these trees blocked out the skies and was composed of countless branches. Between the green leaves, there were blue fruits. These fruits were the keys to entering and exiting the sealed stone world, the stone beads that could resist the destruction of will. That's right. Although the colors were different, whether it was their appearance or size, they were completely the same. And most importantly, beneath this ancient tree that supported the heavens, there was a thick layer of stone beads. This could no longer be described as quantity, but rather as a mountain of stone beads. At this moment, even Qin Yu's mind blanked out from the impact. He fell into a state of silence for a long time. Within the sealed stone world, in order to survive, everyone used every method they could, even killing each other to obtain these stone beads. But these stone beads were actually the fruits of a large tree. After they ripened, no one picked them up. Instead, they fell beneath the tree, like pebbles on a riverbank with no end in sight. After a long time, Qin Yu took a deep breath and closed his eyes. Just now, he had an impulse to rush in and take away all the stone beads. If he could absorb all of these stone beads, just how powerful would his will become? Just thinking about it left him excited and trembling. I can't be anxious. Steady, steady. He repeatedly warned himself. After a moment, Qin Yu opened his eyes and carefully swept his eyes over the ancient tree that supported the heavens, as well as the mountain of stone beads. Soon, he discovered that something was wrong. Although there was a thick pile of fallen leaves on the ground, it was clear that the thickness was different. Some places seemed to have been bombarded, forming giant pits. In addition, some of the thick roots exposed to the ground were incomplete. It was clear that they had been damaged by some external force. A vine hung down from the ancient tree, its ends covered by dead leaves. Looking down, one could faintly make out something pale white. Qin Yu's pupils shrank. Human bones. It seemed that he wasn't the first person to arrive here from the sealed stone world. The hole in the blood-red imprisonment was also evidence of this. As for this seemingly peaceful ancient tree, it was clear that it wasn't as harmless as it seemed on the surface. Indeed, in this world, there was no such thing as a free lunch. The reason Qin Yu was able to easily rush in front of the ancient tree was because he had a lucky chance that allowed his will to transform, and he had also obtained the divine water. He didn't believe that others would have such luck. If they had relied on their own strength to arrive here, just thinking about it was horrifying. But even such a terrifying existence had died beneath the ancient tree. Although it wasn't as he imagined, it was still enough to make Qin Yu feel a sense of dread. Qin Yu stood outside the blood-red imprisonment. He took a deep breath, and a decisive look appeared in his eyes. After discovering the ancient tree and stone beads, it was impossible for him to give up. Since this was the case, there was no reason for him to hesitate. Riches and honor came from danger. If he wanted to obtain great good fortune, he naturally had to withstand the corresponding dangers. In the world of his mind, the ancient giant reared its head back and roared. Once a great danger arrived, it could transform into an ancient being at any time. Moreover, the black bead that Undying had given him before he left had the phantom of spectral disaster sealed within. It should be enough to preserve his life. After finishing his preparations, Qin Yu no longer hesitated. He stepped inside, although there was only a single layer separating them. The inside and outside of the blood-red imprisonment were two completely different worlds. A boundless aura erupted from the ancient tree. It was like the incarnation of the heavens and earth, suppressing all life that intruded into its domain. Qin Yu stuffily coughed. His face paled, as if he were carrying an entire mountain on his back. His body shivered. After a moment, Qin Yu was just barely able to adapt to the suppression of the ancient tree. He took a step forwards. This simple movement seemed to exhaust all of his strength. Sweat gushed out, instantly covering every inch of his forehead. Qin Yu could almost hear his spine groaning in pain. A thought uncontrollably drilled out from the depths of his heart. It is impossible for you to resist this suppression. Give up. The more he suppressed it, the more this thought tumbled in his mind. It was like grass had grown over his heart and his eyes were filled with hesitation and apprehension. In the world of his mind, the ancient giant roared out loud, as if it were roaring at the heavens. Qin Yu's eyes regained clarity and his complexion darkened. He had been cautious enough, but he had unknowingly fallen into the ancient tree's trap. He looked up at the ancient tree that was millions of times larger than him. His eyes were as firm as a boulder. I can definitely do it. The second step, the third step, the fourth step. Qin Yu slowly walked forwards. Sweat soaked his black robes, dripping down his sleeves and falling to the ground. Although he had withstood the suppression of the ancient tree, he didn't dare to relax in the least. Qin Yu didn't believe that this was all the ancient tree's methods were. The stone beads were the key to the sealed stone world. They were the barriers that the living beings of this world relied on to survive. In other words, this ancient tree that could produce stone beads was the foundation of the sealed stone world. How could Qin Yu dare to be careless? The range of the blood-red imprisonment was vast, but the ancient tree's canopy was even greater. Qin Yu soon arrived in front of the mountain of stone beads. Even though he had already seen it, only when he truly stood in front of it could he clearly feel the intense psychological impact. Just as a ripple appeared in Qin Yu's mind, a powerful impact suddenly arrived. It was like an arrow coming from the horizon, falling between Qin Yu's eyebrows. Bang! His ears rang and his vision fell into darkness. Qin Yu felt like he was a wooden plank in the middle of raging waves, about to be smashed to pieces at any moment. Before the first wave subsided, the second attack arrived. Qin Yu's face was drained of blood, and blood flowed out from every orifice of his head. On the canopy, a vine slowly fell down. It gently swayed, as if it were happy that it would soon be able to catch its prey. The vine wrapped around Qin Yu's body, slowly tightening around him like a snake. It lifted him up from the ground and pulled him towards the canopy. At the same time, the third impact arrived. Qin Yu's body twitched several times before he slumped to the ground. Walala! There was a faint sound from the canopy. The branches and leaves scattered outwards, revealing several translucent mouthparts that looked like straws. Gulp! One could clearly hear the sound of saliva being swallowed. It was like a person that had been starving for many years and finally had a feast placed in front of them. Just as these straw-like mouthparts were about to stab into Qin Yu's body, his eyes flashed open. He lifted his hands and instantly shattered the vine. Then he punched out. Pipa! Pipa! The several straw-like mouthparts were directly crushed into powder. As if someone had stabbed a sore spot, the entire ancient tree trembled. Thus, the world within the blood-red prison also began to shake. Countless thick branches came crashing down, blotting out the skies. Qin Yu roared out loud. His bones emitted explosive crackling sounds, and he instantly grew to 100 feet tall. Since I've already entered, I won't leave so easily. This was an inherited, secret technique of the ancient race. At this time, not only did Qin Yu's body reach 100 feet, but the strength he could erupt with also wildly rose. He lifted a hand and punched out. There was a loud roar between the heavens and earth. A towering phantom appeared behind him, punching out with his fist. He was borrowing the strength of the ancient race ancestors. Bang! With a heaven-shaking explosion, the countless branches were forced back by a formidable strength. They trembled and disintegrated. Qin Yu calmed down. He discovered that the strength of this ancient tree wasn't as terrifying as he had imagined. It seemed that its greatest reliance was the impact of will from before. But, unfortunately, it just happened to be within the range he could withstand. Whoosh, whoosh, with the sound of breaking air, vines howled out. Their surfaces split open, revealing countless black sawteeth that shined with a metallic luster. At the same time, the surrounding branches that formed the canopy closed in from all directions, reducing the space he had to move around. Without expression, Qin Yu lifted a hand and pressed forward. The phantom of a towering mountain appeared. As it appeared, it released a proud and aloof aura that couldn't be suppressed by the heavens and earth. One of the ancient races, 3 sacred mountains, suppressing sea. Ancient race. Cries of alarm rose up. The howling vines began to retreat at an even faster speed. As for the surrounding branches, they rapidly retreated. Motes of green light emitted from the ancient tree. They condensed in midair, forming the figure of a young man. His body was slender, and his eyebrows were slightly feminine. He was actually a typical man with the body of a woman. At this time, he stared at Qin Yu with a solemn expression, a trace of panic in the depths of his eyes. Qin Yu asked, "Who are you?" The man suddenly opened his mouth and spoke some strange syllables. Seeing that Qin Yu didn't respond, the nervousness in his eyes immediately faded away. "So you haven't returned to the ancient race's holy land to accept the baptism of the Holy Spring." Qin Yu immediately understood that he had been probed, but he didn't panic at all. He lightly said, "So what?" The man smiled. "Young ancient, I ask that you not misunderstand. I come from the 7 Saint World spirit race and have been on good terms with the ancient race for generations. Because of some unforeseen event, the ancient race has declined. That is why I am surprised to see you here." Qin Yu frowned. "Why should I believe you?" The man bowed. "You can call me Fox Earflower. That is my true name. According to the customs of my spirit race, after you know my name, you and I are considered friends. Young ancient, I understand your cautiousness, but I will soon prove to you that I have no ill intentions towards you." He paused for a moment and then said with a gratified tone, "On the contrary, I will give you a good fortune that will help you become even stronger." Qin Yu said, "Why don't you tell me about it?" The Fox Earflower looked at the ancient tree that supported the heavens, his eyes filled with the vicissitudes of time. "I have already been trapped here for many, many years. It has been so long that many of my memories have become blurry. If it weren't for me constantly fighting with him, I fear my consciousness would have already vanished." He bowed. "First, I must apologize to you. I have consumed too much strength, and most of my consciousness is in a deep slumber. Just now, I instinctively urged the ancient tree to hunt." Qin Yu lightly said, "Let's get to the point. I don't have much patience." The Fox Earflower smiled. "As expected of the ancient race, you all have such impatient personalities. What I want to tell you is that buried beneath this great tree is an extremely powerful existence of the war race. He tried to return from the dead, so I gave up everything and sealed him here. But his strength is far too great. I cannot kill him, and there is even a chance that I will be swallowed by him. But if we join forces, we can kill him and evenly divide all of his strength." Chapter 637. Agree with him. A deep shout sounded out in his mind. Qin Yu focused his mind, but he couldn't find any fluctuations. He glanced at the fox-eared flower across from him. It was clear that this voice wasn't related to him at all. His thoughts raced. Just who was the owner of this voice? What was his goal? The fox-eared flower said, "You should indeed be cautious, but you might as well take a look at my performance. There is no need to rush into a decision." Qin Yu was silent for a long time. "All right, I can agree. But this doesn't represent a promise. If anything goes wrong, I will withdraw at any time." The fox-eared flower brightly smiled. "Of course. Trust me. You will not regret this decision." He lifted a hand and pointed. "Now, I will give you the first reward for trusting a friend. From now on, all of these stone beads belong to you. You can use them as you wish." The fallen leaves beneath the tree began to tumble about. Stone beads tumbled about, all of them spitting out high-grade beads. Seeing Qin Yu remain motionless, the fox-eared flower lifted a hand and a massive number of stone beads rose into the air. "Now you can rest assured and collect them." Qin Yu didn't hesitate. With a flick of his sleeves, light swept out and the stone beads vanished from sight. The fox-eared flower looked towards the direction of the divine path. "Now, I will give you the second reward." He lifted a hand and space violently shook. A deep black appeared and was shaken away. The darkness receded to reveal a figure. Qin Yu's eyes narrowed. This figure was the cultivator that controlled the 3 Unity Trade Association ship, Shu He. However, compared to the past Shu He's aura was completely different. A rich death energy had turned into a vibrant life force. This was the first time Qin Yu had seen something like this happen. He coldly looked at Qin Yu and said, "If you wish to choose a partner, I believe I am the most suitable." The fox-eared flower shook his head. "You are not good. None of you are good." He lifted a second finger. With this finger, space instantly collapsed inward, forming a giant black hole. 3 figures flew out from within and fell to the ground, their complexions pale. The originally cold and cheerless scene suddenly became lively with the appearance of these people. Qin Yu frowned. He hadn't sensed their arrival before. The fox-eared flower smiled and said, "It's normal that you can't sense it because this entire space is an extension of the ancient tree. Your 5 senses have already been blocked." He looked at Shu He and suddenly said, "I remember you. You entered this palace a long time ago, but you were already schemed against and killed. And the ones who killed you should be the 3 cultivators beside you. With a mortal enemy in front of you, are you not prepared to seek justice for yourself?" The old man said in a low voice, "There's no need to sow discord. Do you really think we'll kill each other in the current situation?" The fox-eared flower's eyes flashed. "That might not be the case." Roar! An angry roar suddenly erupted. Shu He's body trembled, and an ominous glint flashed in his eyes. He glared at the 3 backers of the 3 Forces Trading Company, gritting his teeth as his face contorted into a savage expression. The silver-haired man was enraged. "Shu He, have you gone mad?" "Shu!" He wildly laughed. "That's right, I've gone mad. From the moment you betrayed me and turned me into a puppet, I had already gone mad." Saliva dripped down from the corners of his lips. His flesh and bones emitted rumbling sounds, and scales appeared on his skin, but in the next moment they shattered and fell off. Blood flowed out from his wounds, soaking his robes. Shu He's aura rose at an astonishing speed, filled with cruelty and destruction. The old man roared, "Kill him!" He lifted a hand and punched out. Countless beams of purple light appeared, howling towards him like a trillion arrows. Bang! Shu He's mortal body burst apart from within, and a strange beast drilled out. Its body grew in the wind, growing to thousands of feet in the blink of an eye. It opened its mouth and swallowed all of the purple light, like a black hole. The fox-eared flower smiled and said, "The innate talent of the spirit race is to target the soul. It just so happens that this fellow's soul has a flaw, so it won't be difficult to affect him." Shu He, who had transformed into a strange beast, had already fallen into a fierce battle with the three people. Although he was fighting 1 against 3, he actually didn't fall into a disadvantage. This was because the black datura flower played an important role in this. The power of datura. The silver-haired man's face was filled with anger. It was clear he understood this. The fox-eared flower flipped its sleeves. Motes of light floated out from the ancient wood, gathering into the strange beast's body and causing it to erupt with an even greater strength. Our spirit race doesn't have many people. In order to ensure the safety of every member of our race, we are skilled in borrowing strength. There are very few times when we directly fight with others. These 3 human cultivators aren't weak. It won't be difficult for me to kill them, but I will need to use up precious strength. Driving this hybrid is the best choice. Even if I can't kill both sides, I can still save as much strength as possible. Qin Yu had no expression. Shu, this strange beast is not their match. As he spoke, he looked at the silent third person. He was an ordinary-looking young man, but his eyes were filled with the vicissitudes of time, revealing a thick aura of time. But for some unknown reason, Qin Yu felt that this young man gave him a familiar feeling. As he thought about it, he couldn't recall any information about this person. The fox-eared flower said, "Since I said so, this is your second repayment. Leave them to me to deal with." He looked at the strange beast and began to chant some strange syllables. The strange beast that he had transformed into suddenly roared out loud, filled with shock, anger, and fear. But it was clear that after absorbing the motes of light released by the ancient wood, everything was beyond its control. The strange beast's body swelled up once more, clearly surpassing the limits of what it could withstand. Its skin began to crack and wounds began to appear. Blood flowed into its eyes, and the strange beast's aura became even more wild. It lost all reason, leaving behind only slaughter and destruction. It reared its head back and roared. All of the scales on its body suddenly opened up, tearing apart its flesh and blood and flying into the air. Every scale was a node, and they were connected to each other, isolating the space within its range from the outside world. The complexions of the black-robed old ancestor and the silver-haired, middle-aged man changed. The 2 of them roared out loud, and their auras completely erupted. In the next moment, the strange beast that he had transformed into blew up. But what was strange was that the explosive strength didn't directly erupt. Rather, it fused into all of the scales that fell off. The explosion of these scales was the true killing method. Countless fragments carried with them a terrifying strength. They swept out like a tsunami, submerging the 3 people. The fox-eared flower lightly said, "It's over." But before his voice fell, his complexion changed, becoming gloomy and gloomy. In the next moment, a radiant saber light fell down like a waterfall from the highest heavens. It swept through everything, instantly cutting apart the shockwaves of the explosion. Qin Yu fiercely looked up. His eyes locked onto the saber light. He instantly recognized the person who had released it, pressing forward as if even a million obstacles could be cut apart with a single saber strike. Woodchopper Fu! No wonder even the methods of the God Hunter organization weren't able to lock onto his whereabouts. So he had been hiding in the sealed stone world. From the crack, the young man stepped out with a hatchet in his hand. He no longer hid his intentions and looked at Qin Yu with a complex expression. Even after hiding in the sealed stone world, he still wasn't able to escape his pursuit. Could this be fate? The young man shook his head and suppressed all his thoughts. If he believed in fate, it would have been impossible for him to live to this day. He lifted a hand and slashed forwards. Wherever the saber passed, space split apart. The young man stepped in, and his aura vanished from sight. The fox-eared flower frowned. "Sequencer," He let go and didn't continue chasing after him. Since this young man had become a sequencer, it was impossible for him to directly kill him. This was the rules of the sealed stone world. It protected all sequencers from interference from outside forces. Qin Yu asked, "What is a sequencer?" The fox-eared flower said, "You should have already entered the nebula formed by the sealed stone. In the deepest depths of that nebula, there are only 10 towering sealed stones. Each one is like an ancient divine mountain that supports the heavens. Those that have the qualifications to step into these 10 sealed stones are called sequencers." After a brief pause, he continued to say, "And your next goal is to become one of these sequencers. You must finally obtain the marks on the 9 sealed stones. Only by becoming a 9-seal sequencer will you have the qualifications to open the Great Tomb and kill the War Race's supreme beings." Qin Yu's pupils shrank. 9 seals. The fox-eared flower said, "Once you step into the 10th sealed stone, you will automatically become a first seal sequencer. Once you step into the 9th sealed stone, you will become a second seal sequencer. Once you reach the 9th sealed stone, you will become a 9-seal sequencer. Of course, the higher rank sequencers will do everything they can to attack you. This is because it is impossible for 2 sequencers of the same level to coexist. If one appears, it means the earlier sequencers will die." Qin Yu frowned. "What seal is he?" The fox-eared flower lightly said, "The first seal sequencer. He is also the first target you must kill." After a moment of silence, he said, "You two seem to know each other?" Qin Yu nodded. "We have a deep relationship." A cold intent flowed through his words. Disregarding G City, back in Four Seasons City, although Qin Yu had borrowed the woodchopper's hand to escape, he didn't feel the slightest bit of gratitude towards him. The fox-eared flower smiled. "Very good. It is best if you have some old grudge. Only then will you not hesitate." He continued to say, "Once you become a sequencer, you will have the qualifications to freely enter and exit the sealed stone world. With your current strength, you are unable to attack a higher sequence. After you obtain the seal, you can leave this place. When you reach the great Tao realm, you can return to harvest the good fortune that will change your destiny." Qin Yu's eyes brightened. After becoming a sequencer, one could freely enter and exit the sealed stone world. This was indeed a pleasant surprise. He took a deep breath and nodded. "I will immediately go into seclusion to cultivate. The day I leave is the day I seize the position of the sequencer." In the deepest depths of the sealed stone nebula, the towering sealed stone world surpassed imagination. It was simply a miniature version of a planet. Somewhere in this sealed stone world, space suddenly shattered. A young man carrying a hatchet stepped out, his face so gloomy that it seemed as if it would drip water. He stepped forwards and rapidly moved forwards. Soon he arrived in front of a common-looking stone house. He lifted a hand and punched out. Dong! As if he had struck a barrier, layers of fluctuation spread out. After several breaths of time, the stone house opened from within, and an old woodchopper walked out. The young man's figure moved, fusing into the woodchopper's body. Schwa! The woodchopper opened his eyes. He mumbled, "It is impossible for something like believing in fate to exist. I've lived to this day, so there is no way I will easily hand over my life." His eyes were cloudy and uncertain. A moment later, he lifted his hand and the hatchet appeared in his palm. He slashed down into the void. Wherever the blade passed, a crack appeared and he stepped into it. Everything in front of him was pitch black. When light appeared, Woodchopper Fu's stooped figure had returned to the land of divinity and demons. He looked up and determined his direction. Then, with a flick of his sleeves, space exploded and his figure submerged within. Great Yen Empire in a small border city. The shop assistant breathed out cold air. He opened the shop door and looked at the gray skies, muttering a few curses. This damned sky was far too cold. It was hard to imagine just how those sinners that were exiled to the northern snowy region managed to survive. The shop assistant shook his head and put away the thoughts he shouldn't have. He turned and began to clean up the shop. He had to finish everything before the shopkeeper arrived. But just as he began, he felt the light in the shop dim. The shop assistant was surprised. He turned and smiled. "Welcome, guest. May I ask what you would like to order?" The guest wore thick black robes that blocked out the wind and snow. His entire body was hidden within. His voice was old and hoarse. "Call your shopkeeper out. I have some big business." Just as the shop assistant was about to say something, the thick curtains were pushed aside. The normally lazy shopkeeper walked out and gestured with his hand. "Honored guest, please follow me into the room to discuss the details." The black-robed figure nodded and walked in first. The shopkeeper ordered the shop assistant not to be disturbed and then quickly followed. After entering the room, the shopkeeper cupped his hands together and deeply bowed. "Immortal Sex Zhang Chengyuan greets Senior. May I ask what instructions Senior has?" The black-robed man lightly said, "Open the entrance. I want to use it to enter the immortal sect." The shopkeeper revealed an awkward expression. The black-robed man lifted a hand, a token grasped in his palm. The shopkeeper hurriedly bowed. "Senior, please wait a moment." He walked to the center of the room and took out a token. He ruthlessly smashed it against the ground. The ground, which was black and gray and covered in dust, suddenly began to ripple and quickly became transparent. A giant array formation appeared underground. The token that had sunk into the ground was now embedded in the center of the array formation. Faint traces of light flowed along the array formation. It had already been activated. The shopkeeper let out a breath of relief. He respectfully said, "Senior, please." The black-robed man didn't hesitate. He pierced through the ground. The array formation erupted with a brilliant light before vanishing from sight. The token flew back into the shopkeeper's hand. The ground was restored to how it was before, as if everything just now had been nothing but an illusion. Immortal sect. After the black-robed man entered, he didn't conceal his aura. In the skies above his head, winds and clouds surged. The Buddhist nation sovereign and nether domain master immediately sensed something. Both of them revealed looks of surprise as they stood up and stepped forwards. Shwa, Shwa, in front of the black-robed man, two supreme beings of the world appeared. The nether domain master said, "Brother Woodchopper, since you came to the immortal sect today, could it be that you have decided to join and become a member of the immortal sect?" The black-robed man pulled back his robe, revealing the old face of the woodchopper. He went straight to the point. "The reason I came here today is to tell you a piece of information. The demonic path's holy sovereign Chinyu has entered the sealed stone world and will soon attempt to attack the immortal sect." The Buddhist nation's sovereign's complexion changed. Impossible. He was well aware of the strength of the netherworld lotus. It would be difficult for Chinyu to preserve his life, and even if he entered the sealed stone world, it would be impossible for him to have the ability to attack the true sequence in such a short period of time. Because the woodchopper old man had some sort of agreement with the immortal sect, he had a more complete understanding of the sealed stone world. Woodchopper sneered. "I don't want to believe it either, but this is the truth. I've already met him, and I am well aware of the power he possesses. I am a first seal echelon. If I am killed, the demon sovereign will replace me and obtain the ability to freely enter and exit the sealed stone world. To the immortal sect, this is absolutely the worst possible news." The nether domain master said in a low voice, "State your purpose in coming here." Woodcutter said, "It's simple. The immortal sect will help me survive. As long as I live, the demonic path will forever lose the holy sovereign. This transaction is very worth it. I hope the two of you can give me a reply as soon as possible. I really don't have much time. Once the challenge begins, I will be forcefully sent back to the sealed stone world." The Buddhist nation's sovereign and nether domain master glanced at each other. Brother Chai, please wait a moment. The space around the two of them twisted, covering them and isolating them from the outside world. A moment later, the distorted space faded away. The Nether Domain Master directly said, "The immortal sect can help Brother Chai, but there will be a corresponding price." Woodchopper Old Man had no expression. "Both of you should be well aware that this life of mine is incomparably valuable. If you have any conditions, then state them. If I can agree to them, I will not bargain with them." The Nether Domain Master said, "Although Brother Chai didn't explain in detail for you to ask for help, the Demon Sovereign must be extremely strong right now." Woodchopper Old Man's face twitched. To rush all the way to the ancient tree by himself. Just this point alone was enough to prove Qin Yu's strength. Looking at Woodchopper Old Man's expression, the Nether Domain Master continued to say, "In order to ensure that nothing goes wrong, we will take out a partial divinity and give it to Brother Chai. With the power of a spiritual god added to your body, Brother Chai's strength will inevitably rise." Shwa! Woodchopper Old Man's eyes widened, a cold chill soaring into the heavens. "Don't the two of you think this condition is too excessive?" The Nether Domain Master's voice was sincere. "The partial godhood isn't enough to affect Brother Chai. You are still you, but you can no longer be separated from my immortal sect. Looking at the entire land of divinity and demons, besides the immortal sect, there is no one that has the confidence to help Brother Chai. I hope you can consider this carefully." The Buddhist nation's sovereign lightly said, "This is the immortal sect's bottom line." Bang! The space around the woodchopper instantly collapsed and was swallowed up by the darkness. He glared daggers at the two supreme beings of this world, as if he could become hostile at any moment. "All right, I agree." The ice-cold voice seemed to come from the depths of hell. The Buddhist nation, sovereign, turned around. "The fusion of the partial godhood requires time. Don't delay it any further." A demon sovereign that had become a sealer of the sealed stone world was not a situation that the immortal sect wished to see. Otherwise, they wouldn't have taken away the partial divine spark at such a critical time and weakened the immortal sect's rearing divinity. That's right, the immortal sect had a god. This was the greatest secret of the land of divinity and demons. In the world, including the three of them, the number of people who knew of this secret could be counted on one hand. Strictly speaking, for the immortal sect to be able to obtain this slumbering spiritual god, Woodchopper had contributed greatly. Of course, the immortal sect had paid a sufficient price for this. Otherwise, Woodchopper Fu might have died many years ago. A massive stone tablet stood on the ground. The blood-red characters exuded an aura that caused one's soul to tremble. This was the greatest secret of the immortal sect. Besides the big three, no one else was allowed to approach. The Buddhist nation sovereign and Nether Domain Master lifted their hands and pressed down. Light surged on the surface of the stone tablet and an entrance appeared. "Brother Chai, please." The woodchopper expressionlessly stepped in. In the palace, Qin Yu sat down cross-legged. The fog around him tumbled, as if it were being stirred up by invisible hands. At this time, his eyes suddenly flashed open and a sharp light burst out. There was a loud explosion in the air. All of the fog exploded, turning into visible shockwaves that swept out in all directions. After spending 3 months and absorbing countless high-grade stone beads, he had finally broken through. With a thought, a massive expanse of fog was sealed in the void, rapidly compressing into a gray ball that floated in front of him. Chapter 638. Standing up, Qin Yu restrained his smile, and a cold light shined in his eyes. It was time to bring things to an end and send those who deserved to die to their deaths. But before that, he had to pay a visit to the fox-eared flower. Since he considered himself a friend, then when his friend was in danger, he had to do something. The corners of his lips curved up. Qin Yu quickly walked out of the hall. His figure flashed, and he soon arrived beneath the ancient tree that supported the heavens. Motes of light gathered, and the figure of the fox-eared flower appeared. His face was full of praise. "My friend, your rate of progress is truly astonishing." His smile was bright and sincere. "Congratulations, you have completed the materialization of your will." Qin Yu said, "I came to bid farewell." The fox-eared flower said, "Sequencers are extremely strong. You must be careful." Qin Yu directly said, "That's right. I don't have absolute confidence in facing a sequencer, so I think I might need some help." The fox-eared flower's smile stiffened. "Of course, we are friends. If you need me to do anything, feel free to ask." Qin Yu said, "I am worried that the first seal sequencer has already made preparations and is waiting for me to go find him. If you can give me some life-saving methods, I will be very grateful." The fox-eared flower was silent for a long time. Then he squeezed out a smile. "Of course, the spirit race never holds anything back for our friends." He lifted his palm and light surged. A black, ring-shaped jade pendant appeared. "There is a projection of me sealed inside. But, my friend, you should know that my current state is extremely weak and every bit of strength is incomparably precious. If it isn't necessary, I ask that you try not to use it." Qin Yu nodded. "Don't worry, I will remember." He took the jade pendant and nodded. He turned and walked away, soon vanishing at the end of the divine path. The fox-eared flower's smile vanished and his eyes turned gloomy. He could certainly see that Qin Yu was deliberately extorting him. But soon he let out a deep breath and his complexion returned to normal. This was because the fox-eared flower was sure that everything Qin Yu took from him now, he would return it double in the future. Qin Yu laid down over a dozen layers of imprisonment on the surface of the jade pendant before putting it away. His vigilance towards the fox-eared flower had never weakened in the least. For this friend of his to be willing to compromise, it seemed that he was asking for a great deal. Qin Yu didn't want to lose himself in the end. Qin Yu stepped forwards in the towering palaces that covered an astonishing area. The surrounding fog retreated like a tide as if in awe. One by one, the walking corpses sensed his aura from afar, and their faces were filled with terror. They either knelt on the ground or turned around and fled without a trace. His materialized will made him seem like a walking mountain to the walking corpses. If they approached him, they would be crushed. There were many merchant associations in the sealed stone world, and there were as many as for that had the ability to enter the bewildering fog sea. One of them was the Triad Merchant Association, which had suffered a massive change and collapsed overnight. Not many people knew the truth, but just the few words that were spread out were shocking enough. After more than 2 months of silence, a merchant association finally sent a large ship into the bewildering fog sea. Stone pearls were consumables, and this was their business. They had no choice but to come. On the silent ship, the atmosphere was oppressive. The cultivators that came with the ship all had grim expressions. The order they received was to be extremely careful and only seek to safely bring back the stone bead. They must not complicate matters. Suddenly, a deep roar came from the depths of the mist. The complexions of everyone on the ship changed. The cultivator at the bow stood up, alert. The bewildering fog sea was fraught with dangers to begin with, much less at this time. His reaction wasn't anything to be surprised about. Soon, the fog violently tumbled and a massive black shadow appeared at the end of their line of sight. The cultivators on the ship paled. A strange beast of the bewildering fog sea. This was an extremely cruel species. Once it discovered an intruder, it would not rest until all of them were killed. Over the years, the ships sent out by the 4 great merchant associations had all suffered miserable losses, and most of them were related to this strange beast. The black shadow was extremely fast. As the distance between them shrank, the oppressive feeling it brought with it also increased. Everyone on the ship revealed looks of despair. This was because this terrifying, strange beast was clearly coming for them. As for escaping in the bewildering fog sea, no one could escape the pursuit of strange beasts. This was the experience that countless pioneers had exchanged for with their blood. Activate all array formations. Everyone attack. Fight it out with it. The cultivator at the bow roared, but his voice couldn't help but tremble. Their legs trembled and their teeth chattered. Everyone knew that these were just words that sounded nice. Once the strange beast attacked, they would face a one-sided slaughter. Close! Close! Suddenly, a cultivator cried out in alarm. There's someone on its head! Shwa! Countless eyes gathered. Sure enough, on the head of this flat-bodied strange beast that resembled a catfish magnified thousands of times over, a black-robed cultivator could be seen. Compared to the strange beast's body, he was as small as an ant. But for some unknown reason, every cultivator that saw him felt as if they were looking up at a great mountain, as if the strange beast beneath his feet was a tiny insect crawling at the foot of a mountain. Just as the strange beast was about to crash into the ship, its body suddenly swayed. It traced a nimble trajectory through the fog and passed by the ship. The waves of fog that rose up caused the ship to shake. Everyone's eyes widened as they watched the strange beast pass by and howl into the distance. The cultivator at the bow suddenly fell to his knees. He loudly said, "Thank you, Senior, for not killing us." Everyone regained their composure and knelt to the ground, their faces filled with the joy of surviving a calamity. At the edge of the bewildering fog sea, the two cultivators, one chasing and the other fleeing, would exchange blows from time to time, producing loud explosions. "Don't go too far. Otherwise, if you anger me, I will rush into the bewildering fog sea, and no one will be able to obtain the stone bead." The fleeing cultivator roared out loud. It was clear that another battle had erupted for the sake of the stone bead. The pursuing cultivator sneered, "If you have the guts, then rush in. The stone bead will be buried with you." At this time, there was a loud rumbling sound, coming from the fog not too far away. The complexions of the two cultivators changed. What was this sound? It soon grew larger, giving off a feeling as if it were a great wave rolling in from afar. This is bad. The two cultivators no longer cared about fighting. They turned and fled outwards. Just as they were a short distance away, they subconsciously turned their heads. What they saw nearly caused their hearts to stop beating. The fog was torn apart from within, and an incomparably massive, strange beast drilled out. But what was even more shocking was that there was a black-robed cultivator standing atop the strange beast's head. The cultivator stepped forward and came down from the strange beast's head. Its massive body lay flat on the ground, and it let out a low roar, as if it were respectfully bidding farewell. The black-robed cultivator didn't look back. He took several steps forwards and vanished from sight. The massive strange beast stood up. Its icy cold eyes swept over the two dumbfounded cultivators. It was like a bucket of cold water had been poured over their heads, nearly freezing their souls. By the time they regained their composure, the strange beast had already vanished from sight. If it weren't for the fog still violently tumbling around them, they would have suspected that this was all an illusion. Ah! With a sharp cry, the two cultivators turned and ran, no longer bothering to continue fighting. Endless years passed. Within the sealed stone world, large and small families gradually formed. They vigorously raised their juniors in exchange for the continuation of their bloodline. At the edge of the sealed stone nebula, for white-clothed old men were leading several young men and women. They were currently cultivating. Remember, you must calm your hearts and experience the suppression of the sealed stone world's will. Only like this can you obtain the greatest tempering effects. The road of cultivation is destined to be lonely. Only by withstanding this loneliness can you welcome the radiance of the future. Talent is important, but a firm and determined heart is also an indispensable key to cultivation. Suddenly, the white-clothed old man's complexion changed. Within his line of sight, the sealed stone world began to gently tremble. The will had been destroyed. This was an indelible mark that had been branded into the souls of all living beings within the sealed stone world. But as he expected, the earth-shattering fluctuations didn't appear. The sealed stone world continued to tremble, and the trembling became increasingly intense. What was going on? Suddenly, the white-clothed old man's complexion changed. He saw a figure approaching from the endless nothingness. It was because he was approaching that the sealed stone world began to tremble more and more. Could it be that this person's aura was causing the sealed stone world to tremble? How was this possible? The black-robed cultivator who had just woken up suddenly looked up. The white-clothed old man stuffily coughed. He felt as if a mountain was pressing down on his mind, and his complexion rapidly paled. The juniors behind him were even worse off. Their legs went soft, and they fell limp. Luckily, the black-robed cultivator only glanced at them for a moment before looking away. Although his steps seemed slow, his speed was actually astonishing. In several breaths of time, he vanished deep into the sealed stone world. As for the trembling sealed stone world, it gradually calmed down. The group of young men and women were soaked in sweat. They looked as if they had just been fished out of water. Their eyes were filled with awe. As they looked in the direction Chinyu left, a female cultivator asked, "Elder, who is he?" The white-clothed old man's complexion changed. He shouted, "Shut up! How can you and I discuss such an existence? Even thinking about it is disrespectful." He cupped his hands together and deeply bowed. "The juniors of the family do not understand the rules. I ask for seniors' forgiveness." Everything fell silent. After a long time, the white-clothed old man let out a long breath. He straightened himself and said, "Let's go. Also, immediately send a message to the family and recall all the people that have gone out. From today onwards, the MO family will be sealed up." The black-robed cultivator came from the void. Deep within the void was the bewildering fog. See, this sort of existences, every action had a meaning behind it. They wouldn't leave for no reason. Perhaps a great upheaval was about to occur in the sealed stone world. In the endless void, the towering sealed stone world supported the world. Its size was comparable to an ancient divine mountain. But today, this ancient divine mountain had changed from its usual desolate and silent state. Instead, it was bustling with noise and excitement. Large ships were anchored at the void pier. Countless cultivators in luxurious clothes were chatting with each other. Their eyes occasionally swept over the heavens supporting sealed stone world, and they couldn't help but feel endless awe and reverence from the depths of their hearts. It had to be known that this was the center of the sealed stone world. It was the residence of a supreme, transcendent sequence powerhouse and represented unsurpassed authority and strength. Although he was only a one-seal, transcendent sequence powerhouse, countless years had passed since he was promoted, and his status had remained as stable as Mount Tai. Thus, the transcendent sequence powerhouses of the sealed stone world hadn't been replaced for a very, very long time. It was rumored that this one-seal transcendent sequence powerhouse's true strength was terrifying. It was only because of some sort of restriction that he didn't continue to challenge. Today was the only time that this transcendent sequence powerhouse would publicly hold a banquet to celebrate his birthday. The various influences of the sealed stone world regarded him with incomparable importance. If they could take advantage of this opportunity to form a relationship with this transcendent sequence powerhouse, they would smile even in their dreams. Not too far away in the void, a large ship floated in the air. The deck was filled with people. Several maintenance cultivators were sweating profusely, and their faces were white and blue. "Hurry and fix the ship. There isn't enough time. If you delay the Transcendent Sequence's birthday banquet, don't even think about having a good ending." A chubby middle-aged man was sweating profusely as he roared in rage. Yes, yes. We will do our best. Please wait a moment." The maintenance cultivators hurriedly responded, but their complexions began to turn green. The middle-aged man's breathing became increasingly rough. Blue veins popped up on his neck, making one worry that they would explode at any moment. Can we remove the token and rush over ourselves? A cultivator braced himself and said, "The token is a one-time use item. After fusing with the ship, it becomes one with the ship. There is no way to take it out." The center of the sealed stone world was filled with a powerful will suppression. Without an invitation token, it was impossible to arrive here. If one rashly left the ship, they would be crushed and their soul would collapse. What do you think we should do? I paid a great price to buy this token. If we can't make it in time, then it will all be wasted. The middle-aged man clenched his teeth. At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded out. "May I ask why you have come here?" Everyone on the deck was stunned. This was because this voice didn't come from any of them, but came from outside the ship. But the ship's array formation was still running. So how could this voice easily pass through? The middle-aged man looked up, his eyes meeting the black-robed youth's. His white flesh shivered, and then he brightly smiled. "Reporting to Senior, we have been invited by Lord Chai to participate in his birthday celebration." The black-robed youth's eyebrows rose up. "Lord Chai." A one-seal sequence holder, Lord Chai. The middle-aged man carefully said, "Birthday celebration." The black-robed youth was silent for a moment. Then he said, "Do you need any help?" Everyone on the ship was stunned. The black-robed youth lightly said, "As a reward, I hope to hitch a ride with you." The middle-aged man was overjoyed. "To be able to serve Senior is my honor. Hurry and open the array formation so that Senior can come in." The black-robed youth landed on the deck. He swept his eyes around and then lifted a foot. Dong! The large ship suddenly trembled, and the dim lines on the surface of the ship quickly lit up one after another. "All right." The black-robed youth looked at the dumbfounded crowd and said, "Let's hurry." The middle-aged man regained his composure. He hurriedly said, "Hurry, hurry." Looking at Chinyu's back, he couldn't help but wipe away the cold sweat on his forehead. Although the roar just now had been fierce, he was well aware of the fundamental reason the ship had broken down. Beneath its bright and beautiful exterior, the truth was that this ship was extremely old. Many of the array formation nodes were shaking and unstable. Once the ship went on strike, it would be a major problem. Maintaining the entire array formation required him to comb through it. He didn't want to spend that money, so he had been delaying it. He never imagined that a problem would occur at such a critical moment. But the black-robed youth in front of him had casually tidied up the entire array formation with a single step. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he wouldn't have believed it. What sort of cultivation did one need to accomplish this? The middle-aged man's eyes flashed with awe. But as he looked at the black-robed youth standing at the bow of the ship, he couldn't find an excuse to speak. He hesitated again and again before finally giving up on the idea of chatting with him. The black-robed youth could clearly feel the middle-aged man's gaze, but he didn't want to waste his breath on him. His eyes were calm and cold. "Birthday celebration? Then I'll let you finish today." This youth was Chinyu. He had come all the way here from the bewildering Fog Sea. He was here to settle his grudges and seize the position of the echelon. An hour later, the heaven-supporting sealing stone appeared in everyone's line of sight. Besides Chinyu, all the cultivators on the ship fell into a daze. They didn't dare to imagine just what sort of terrifying was contained within such an astonishingly large sealing stone. All that remained in their minds was a single thought. Echelon was truly worthy of being in existence that stood at the peak of the world of the sealed stone. With the token, after verification, the ship smoothly anchored. The middle-aged man hurried forwards. Without waiting for him to bow, Chinyu said, "From now on, I am only a follower of yours." The middle-aged man's heart shook and he immediately paled. But as he looked at Chinyu's calm appearance, he calmed down a little. He comforted himself that just who was tired of living would dare to provoke a echelon existence. Qin Yu lightly said, "Don't worry, I won't cause any trouble for you." The middle-aged man hurriedly said, "I am the president of the Divine Wind Commerce. My surname is Zhua, and my name is Dong Dong. You can call me Little Zhua or Little Dong." Zhua Dong Dong. Qin Yu looked at the man's round body, and a strange expression crossed his face. Zhua Dong Dong scratched his head and awkwardly smiled. "My parents might have given me this name because they wanted a daughter, but it turns out I was reincarnated into the wrong body." Qin Yu nodded. "Qin Yu." Zhua Dong Dong coughed. He lowered his voice and said, "Senior Qin, I apologize for offending you." He hurried forwards to greet the welcoming cultivator. After exchanging greetings, he said, "Fellow Taoist Zhang, this is a junior relative of mine. He hopes to enter the banquet with me and broaden his horizons. This is just a small token of my respect, so please accept it." As he spoke, he handed over a small cloth bag. The cultivator on the other side lowered his head and looked at the contents of the cloth bag. A smile suddenly appeared on his stiff face, and he said, "Since President Zhua is so sincere, I can only make an exception. However, only he can go in with you." Zhua Dong Dong brightly smiled. Of course. I've really troubled Brother Zhang. If there is time in the future, I will definitely treat you. Let's get to know each other better." This person's glib tongue wasn't weak. Qin Yu followed behind Zhua Dong Dong and smoothly stepped onto the sealed stone. The moment they landed, Qin Yu slowly looked up. His eyes were deep, as if they could pierce through the barriers of space. In the grand palace, the woodchopper opened his eyes. He could feel an aura filled with killing intent rushing towards him, and his eyes began to ripple. Such a coincidence had actually happened today. Could this be fate? He took a deep breath and suppressed the restlessness in his heart. He understood Qin Yu's meaning. He stood up and cupped his hands together, expressing his thanks. Zhua Dong Dong had a cautious expression. "Senior Qin, what is it?" Qin Yu looked away. He lightly said, "I'm fine." Zhua Dong lightly coughed and stepped forwards. They had arrived relatively late. Most of the congratulatory guests had already taken their seats. A maid stood outside the hall. After asking for their identities, she led the two into the hall. The giant banquet hall was divided into several areas. White jade tables and tables were neatly arranged, and the dishes and wine had already been prepared. An enticing aroma wafted out. With the qualifications of the Divine Walk Chamber of Commerce, they were seated at the edge of the hall, near the back. But before the two of them could take their seats, a cultivator hurried over and respectfully said, "Two guests, please wait a moment. Your seats have been rearranged. Please follow me." Under the shocked gazes of the surrounding guests, Qin Yu and Zhua Dong Dong were led to the center of the hall. Only distinguished guests had the qualifications to sit there. Many people that knew Zhua Dong Dong felt waves of shock rise in their hearts. They couldn't figure out just how this brat old Zhua had suddenly become so arrogant. The distinguished guests in the main seats subconsciously furrowed their eyebrows before they composed themselves. Many people smiled and nodded in acknowledgement, although they didn't know why a dignified existence like them would value such a minor character. This didn't hinder their performance. "No matter who it is, we will give face to anyone you like. Aren't we very sensible and well-behaved? If you want to take in a little brother, you have to consider me." Zhua Dong Dong's face flushed red and his grin nearly reached his ears. Although he had some achievements in his life, when had he ever had such a glorious moment? However, his mind only felt a little dizzy before he realized that the Lord Sequencer didn't truly care about his face. Everything was because of this taciturn Senior Qin. Thinking about it carefully, when Senior Qin first entered the sealing stone, he must have been greeting him. That's right, that must be it. It seemed that Senior Qin and Lord Chai were old acquaintances. This was wonderful. Even if he couldn't latch onto Lord Chai's thigh this time, being able to curry favor with Senior Qin could still be considered a harvest. The more he thought about it, the more wonderful it seemed. Zhuang Dong picked up a cup of wine and said, "Brother, Qin, let's have a drink." Qin Yu looked at his excited appearance and nodded. He picked up a cup of wine and drank it in one gulp. Drinking good wine and killing powerful enemies, this was quite fitting. Zhuang Dong became even more excited. He lowered his voice and said, "Today was all thanks to Brother Qin. If there is anything you need the Divine Walk Chamber of Commerce to do in the future, Brother Qin, please feel free to speak. I will go through fire and water without hesitation." Just as his voice fell, a cold voice sounded out. "The banquet host hasn't arrived yet. If you two start eating and drinking now, isn't that a bit disrespectful?" Zhuang Dong's expression stiffened. He looked up and couldn't help but shrink his neck. He didn't recognize the young man who spoke, but the frowning old man beside him was an illustrious figure. He was the patriarch of the Nanhe Chamber of Commerce's Jiang family. His family had produced a true seal sequence powerhouse, ranked 7th. Within the sealed stone world, he was one of those that could do whatever they wanted and no one dared to provoke him. "My apologies, I forgot myself for a moment. I am truly sorry, everyone." Zhuang cupped his hands together, his tone incomparably humble. The Jiang family patriarch lightly said, "This is Lord Chai's banquet. Don't speak too much." The young man respectfully bowed. With a deep look in his eyes, he swept his eyes over the surrounding cultivators. For a normally quiet first seal sequence powerhouse to suddenly have such a high-profile birthday celebration. Was there some deeper meaning behind this? Some people naturally had to find out more about this and also give some warnings. It was because Jiang Tiange was aware of this that he spoke up. He wasn't some brainless and arrogant young master. He wanted to use these words to tell the surrounding guests that just because they held onto the thigh of a first seal sequence powerhouse, they could act recklessly. If they didn't give Zhuang any face, they would similarly dare to move against them. Gulp! There was a light sound. In the sudden silence, it was particularly clear. Qin Yu put down his wine cup and picked up his chopsticks. He picked up a piece of bamboo shoot and chewed on it, completely ignoring Jiang Tiange's gloomy expression. The surrounding cultivators all looked over. Although they tried their best to remain calm, it wasn't hard to detect the excitement in their hearts from their small movements. Were they going to directly confront him? Zhuang bitterly smiled. His legs nearly turned to jelly. "Senior Qin, you might not be afraid, but I have thin arms and legs. I simply cannot afford to provoke the Jiang family. If this matter were to be blamed on me, that would truly be a tragedy." But in the end, the scene that everyone was waiting for didn't appear. The light above the throne slightly twisted and a figure walked out. Although he was old, there was still a terrifying aura hidden within his body. This aura was enough to make anyone's heart tremble. The hall fell silent and all sound vanished. Then there was the sound of tables and chairs being pushed around. Everyone stood up and bowed. "We greet Lord Chai and congratulate him on his boundless longevity." Only Qin Yu didn't move. He sat at the table and continued to eat and drink. Everyone's eyes widened, a bit confused. Just who was this person? Did he come here to show off his existence? He must be tired of living. But unexpectedly, Lord Chai didn't seem to notice. He smiled and nodded. "Thank you all for attending my birthday banquet. Please sit down." The banquet officially began. The first segment was to offer birthday congratulations. The various guests took out their prepared birthday gifts and presented them in front of everyone. The process was extremely lively and many precious treasures appeared. But amidst the cries of surprise, many people looked at Qin Yu. There was nothing that could be done. The situation just now had been far too strange. It had to be known that Lord Chai was a sequencer, a character that stood at the peak of the sealed stone world. No one could offend him in the slightest. As for Qin Yu's motionless performance just now, how could it be described as offensive? In the end, nothing happened at all. Lord Chai just brushed it off as if nothing had happened. Who was this person? No matter how much they rummaged through their memories, they couldn't find any useful information. Dao friend, I am an elder of the Zong family. Since this is the first time we meet, I would like to be friends with you. An old man held a cup of wine and approached with a smile. Qin Yu. He nodded and drained his cup. Some people feared the Jiang family and didn't dare to approach. But there were also some people who didn't have the qualifications to look at the Jiang family's face. Seeing that Qin Yu wasn't difficult to approach, more and more people began toasting him. From his high seat, the woodchopper looked down at Qin Yu, who was drinking with the crowd, a smile on his face. Drinking and killing. It seemed like he was very confident, but it was not easy for him to live to this day. How could he admit defeat so easily? He didn't want to think too much. After drinking today's wine, he would take the enemy's head. The woodchopper raised his cup. Everyone, let us drink. In response, the fragrance of wine filled the hall. Zhuangdong soon drank too much. All around him were big shots that he normally couldn't reach. But now they were all gathered together to drink wine. If it were anyone else, they would be drunk. His tongue stuck out. Qin, Senior Qin, I am in the human trafficking business. Please don't look down on me. I can be considered to have accumulated some good karma. If it weren't for me taking in many people who entered the sealed stone world, they simply wouldn't have been able to survive. Seeing Qin Yu not show any signs of impatience, Zhuangdong became even more drunk. Senior, I have a proud story to tell you. Several decades ago, I picked up a fellow who was nearly beaten to death by someone. His cultivation was even worse. But guess what? That boy was born to adapt to the sealed stone world. In a short 30 years, his cultivation made successive breakthroughs, and now he has become my son-in-law. But what a pity that daughter of mine is unlucky. She was ill in her mother's womb, and she hasn't recovered in these past years. My son-in-law is an honest person. He has always been by her side. Old Zhu also admires him. Qin Yu could see that Zhuangdong was using his drunkenness to curry favor with him, but he didn't mind listening to it as a story. He casually asked, "What is your son-in-law's name?" But he didn't know that by asking this question, he had become the character in the story. Zhuangdong rubbed his temples. Shuezheng, yes, that's his name. I told him to take my surname Zhua, but he stubbornly refused. He said that he would never be able to return to his past life and that this name was his last thought. Qin Yu put down his wine cup. He hesitated for a moment. What is his name? Zhuangdong's drunkenness instantly dissipated. Shuezheng, Senior Qin Yu said. Did you ask where he came from? Zhuangdong didn't dare to hide anything. I did, but he didn't say. But this boy is from the sea race, and his cultivation isn't even worth a fart in front of Senior. He definitely isn't the person you are looking for. He really wanted to slap himself in the face several times. What was he blabbering about? If something happened to his son-in-law, his daughter definitely wouldn't be able to live either. Thinking of this, he panicked even more. Qin Yu let out a long breath. He muttered, Shuezheng, there really is some fate between us. He looked at Zhuangdong. Don't worry, I'm not here to seek revenge. After today's matter is over, bring me to see him. Without speaking further, he looked up towards the seat of honor deep within the hall. At this time, the woodcutter lowered his head and their gazes collided in midair. It was time to end this. Chapter 639. Bang! The banquet hall turned into a raging sea. All the cultivators present paled and their eyes widened, filled with panic and panic. They had no idea just what was happening. Just what did Lord Chai mean by this? As a dignified echelon, he wanted to take his life? Who in the hall dared to do this? And who could accomplish it? The woodchopper soon solved everyone's puzzlement. He lifted a hand and space shattered. A black hatchet flew out and fell into his palm. With the hatchet in hand, the woodchopper's aura rose up once more. In everyone's minds, a towering saber phantom appeared, one that could cut down the highest heavens and 10th earth. My surname is Chai. The first half of my life was spent chopping wood, and the second half of my life I used this saber to survive. For tens of millions of years, it has been a struggle and a torment for me. But in the end, I couldn't give up on this mortal world. Because of this, I have done many things that went against my heart and defied my conscience. There are many things that I remember, and many more that I have forgotten. But every night I reincarnate, I ask myself, and I have never regretted it. The world is so wonderful, and every day is a new beginning. Just how lucky is it to be alive? Since I was born into this world, how could I let go? He lifted the hatchet and pointed it at Chinyu. I crossed the river of time without relying on anything else. I only relied on this saber and my will to never give up. Today, I ask the demon sovereign to hand over your head so that my tens of millions of years of bitter suffering can finally bear fruit. Swedongdong's eyes widened. There was only a single thought in his mind. It was over, it was over, it was all over. His eyes rolled back into his head, and before he could catch his breath, he fell to the ground with a thud and fainted as if he had been relieved of his burden. Beside him, Chin drank the wine in his cup and set it down. He stood up and said, "That will depend on whether or not you have the ability to take my head." The invisible auras of both sides collided in the void. The grand hall was instantly broken apart from the inside. Large chunks of rubble flew out in all directions, turning everything into ruins. The stunned guests in the hall didn't even have time to recover before they were shaken away. They screamed as they were shaken away, blood gushing out from their mouths. In the next moment, all of them froze. Their eyes widened as they saw a dazzling saber light. It held forwards, seeming as if it could cut apart all of them. Beneath this saber light, Chin couldn't help but feel a stabbing pain between his eyebrows. What a powerful strike! He suddenly understood why Solitary Westgate said that the woodchopper was the strongest whetstone. Just as he had said, he had only been relying on the chopper in his hand to survive until now. Lifting a blade to break through time, going against the limits of life. It wasn't difficult to understand why he was able to slash out such a terrifying blade. But no matter what, he had to die today. Chin took out the jade ring pendant and tossed it forwards. As for the fox-eared flower's solemn warning, he didn't place it in his heart from the start. Pah! The jade pendant was corroded by the aura of the saber light and directly shattered in the middle. The shadow of a towering ancient tree emerged, and the dense layers of thick branches spread out like a tide, engulfing the saber light. The woodchopper's expression was cold and callous. His eyes did not show the slightest ripple because of the scene in front of him. He walked forward with large strides, the hatchet in his hand rising, and without any flourishes, he chopped down a second time. This saber strike was much simpler than the first one. The white saber light did not seem extraordinary, and even its aura was much weaker. However, everywhere the saber light passed, the space of the sealed stone world continuously shattered, creating one thick and huge crack after another. It had to be known that the sealed stone world had a powerful imprisonment, unless one became a beyonder. Otherwise, no matter how monstrous their cultivation was, they would never be able to leave this place. To be able to shatter the space here, just this point alone was enough to show just how terrifying this seemingly ordinary saber strike was. As if it had cut into a thick layer of rubber, the ancient tree phantom violently shook. Countless branches and leaves shattered into nothingness, tightly wrapping around the saber light. The ancient tree phantom twisted but didn't show any signs of breaking. The woodchopper slashed out a third time. The momentum of each saber strike was weaker than the last. After the third saber fell, there wasn't even the slightest movement. It simply rose up and fell down without any change. But the ancient tree phantom began to shake. The fox-eared flower's face appeared in the tree trunk. His expression was solemn and helpless. "My friend, I hope that after today, I can truly obtain some of your trust." The ancient tree phantom shattered, turning into countless tumbling green flows of energy. They rapidly gathered together, condensing into a massive green leaf that seemed as if it would flow out at any moment. Qin Yu's eyes sharpened. This was clearly just a leaf, but the feeling it gave him was as if it could cover the entire heavens. A leaf covering the heavens. This should be it. Suddenly, the veins in the center of this green leaf seemed to be cut by a sharp weapon. A common-looking scar appeared on the leaf. But in Qin Yu's eyes, this scar had already torn through the entire sky. He could clearly feel the annihilating aura that emanated from the edges of the scar. Decisive, domineering, pressing forward with an indomitable will. The fox-eared flower's weak voice sounded out. "I can only help you to this point, my friend." The green leaf shattered inch by inch, vanishing into thin air. Qin Yu stepped forwards. "Fellow Taoist woodchopper, after these 3 saber strikes, can you still continue to slash out?" Across from him, the woodchopper shook his head. "These 3 saber strikes have already exhausted all of my energy. The demon sovereign's methods are excellent. I truly admire you. The cultivation world didn't care about being despicable or being fair. As long as one could laugh to the end, they could do anything." Qin Yu hadn't even attacked, and yet he had managed to resist the strongest 3 saber strikes of his life. The woodchopper couldn't blame him. He could only accept reality. Luckily, he had already viewed Qin Yu as his life or death enemy. He didn't dare to be careless in the slightest, so he had gone to the immortal sect ahead of time to prepare for today. Although the 2 supremes from the immortal sect had sworn that the divided divine spark wouldn't affect his consciousness and that he would still be himself in the end, the woodchopper still instinctively didn't want to use the power of the divided divine spark. This was because he was well aware of how terrifying a spiritual god was. That was a type of existence that surpassed the rules. Strictly speaking, it couldn't be considered a living being. But now he had no other choice. If he didn't want to die, then he could only live on in pain. Qin Yu frowned. He suddenly felt a threatening aura from the woodchopper, vast and boundless. It looked down upon the world, suppressing all life. The woodchopper sighed. He slowly closed his eyes. "I have struggled to live, but I never dared to touch a strength that I couldn't control. This was because I wasn't sure whether or not I would be the one to survive in the end. But in the end, I will break through my own bottom line. Your Majesty, Demon Sovereign, please feel the strength of a spiritual god." His back straightened. His wrinkled face began to rapidly rejuvenate, regaining its luster. His bones crackled and popped. His body grew several inches, and the crown of hair on his head shattered. His hair rapidly grew until it fell to his waist, turning into a striking silver white. Shwa! The woodchopper opened his eyes. Lightning seemed to cut through the world. 2 spiraling runes appeared in the depths of his pupils. A transcendent majesty and noble aura erupted from his body, flooding every inch of space around him. He looked down at his own palm. His 5 fingers clenched together, feeling the boundless strength contained between his fingers and his palm. The woodchopper mumbled, "This is the strength of a spiritual god." Although he only let out a small sound, when it spread through the air, it was like a thunderclap. This was because these words had touched upon the rules, causing them to voluntarily submit and be controlled. Qin Yu's complexion was dignified. He had already guessed this just now, and now he had confirmed it. He took a deep breath and suppressed his tumbling emotions. No matter where the woodchopper had obtained this divine spark from, everything had already become reality. He couldn't change this, so he could only accept it. The surrounding cultivators that were sent flying away had long since been scared silly. Their eyes were filled with horror. They had been filled with joy, excitement, and anticipation to attend the longevity feast. Encountering a challenge from a sequencer was already frightening enough, But who would have thought that they would see a spiritual god descend upon them today? A thought appeared in the minds of countless people. No wonder the status of the first seal sequencer had been as stable as a mountain for countless years. It was because he had been hiding such a terrifying card in his hand. Since the strength of a spiritual god had appeared, was there any need to say more about the result of today's challenge? Everyone looked at Chinyu with sympathy in their eyes. Although they didn't know who this person was, they knew that he was absolutely and incomparably terrifying powerhouse. But after today, they feared he would vanish forever. In the collision of auras, Zhuodongdong, who had been sent away by Chinyu, barely managed to open his eyes. As he saw this, he fainted once more. "Your Majesty, the Demon Sovereign, I ask that you die." The woodchopper lifted his hand and his long saber fell down. The black and dirty machete that was covered with nicks suddenly shone with a dazzling silver light. As it cut down, space and time split apart, forming straight cracks. This strike was galvanized by the power of a spiritual god. The machete erupted with an even more terrifying killing power. In the woodchopper's hands, it had experienced the baptism of tens of millions of years. After being tempered in countless battles, it had reached the limit of what a tool could be. Now that the power of a spiritual god had poured into it, it completed some sort of transformation, becoming an existence that could almost compare to a divine tool. Chinyu roared out loud. His heart wildly beat, causing blood to flow through his body at an astonishing speed. The temperature of his blood began to rise, becoming incomparably hot. It was like the red magma of a volcano. His exposed skin rapidly turned red. White steam rose up, gathering into clouds above his head. Every heartbeat was like the beating of a great drum, emitting incomparably powerful fluctuations of blood energy. These fluctuations scattered the rules between the heavens and earth, allowing them to struggle free from the control of the spiritual god and break through the invisible suppressive strength. He lifted a hand and punched out. Countless rules moved with it. A vigorous strength erupted, as if a vast river or sea were toppling over. Rumble, rumble. There was a heaven-shaking explosion, as if the end of the world had arrived. Terrifying fluctuations swept out in all directions. Run. Run for your life. With screams, the surrounding cultivators turned and ran, each of them using all their strength. If they were sucked into this, even if they had 10 lives, they would be crushed in the blink of an eye. A piece of stone held out, smashing into Zhuodongdong's soft abdomen. Zhuodongdong's eyes popped open, and he vomited as he was sent far away. Chinyu drew backwards. A destructive fluctuation wreaked havoc in his body, like invisible blades that tore apart his flesh and blood and crushed his bones. On the surface of his skin, countless tiny spots appeared. These were formed by the accumulated blood in his body. He didn't have any expression on his face, as if he couldn't feel the pain in his body. He turned his hand and slammed it against his chest. With a dull thumping sound, Chinyu's flesh and blood violently shook. Countless waves rose up within him, forcing out the strength that invaded his body. Pa! On the surface of Chinyu's fist, a white cut suddenly exploded. Faint traces of silver light flew out, wanting to fly away as if they had a mind of their own. With a cold snort, Chinyu grasped out his 5 fingers. Extinguish! A wild strength erupted, causing space to wildly shake and shatter. The silver light was repeatedly cut to pieces before finally vanishing. The power of a spiritual god was said to be everlasting and immortal, but Chinyu's current strength was enough to knock an immortal into dust. With a saint-step demon body, he could already galvanize the rules of the world. Moreover, what the woodchopper had obtained wasn't a complete godhead. Of course, even so, in his battle with Chinyu, the woodchopper still held the upper hand. In prison, a deep shout spread out in all directions. Everywhere it went, the rules of the world tightened, weaving together into a quagmire. Chinyu fell into this quagmire. Pressure rushed towards him from all directions, as if an invisible mountain was pressing down on him. Every time he took a breath, it was hard to do so. The reason that spiritual gods were terrifying was to a great extent because they could control all rules of the world. Every movement they made was filled with the might of the heavens. The woodchopper cried out in joy. The silver light on its surface became even richer, becoming even more dazzling. As the blade fell, it seemed to cut apart space and time. When the blade rose, it was far away, but when the blade fell, it was already close. Bang! Qin Yu directly disintegrated. In the pitch-black darkness, space fragments tumbled about. Endless silver light erupted, turning into a silver sea that swallowed up his figure. But as the woodchopper saw this, his expression became even more solemn. He stepped forwards, his silver hair surging around him. Every step he took caused the world to rumble and roll out in all directions. He lifted the silver-white woodchopper and chopped down with each step. Space cracks appeared in the void where Qin Yu was, causing the silver sea to expand again and again as it released a heaven-destroying aura. The crazily fleeing cultivators could feel the terrifying fluctuations coming from behind them. All of their faces turned green. Without caring about anything else, they buried their heads in the ground and fled for their lives. The 19th saber. The woodchopper suddenly sighed. He looked at the silver sea in front of him and slowly shook his head. He seemed to realize something that left him feeling helpless. Roar. An angry roar was like 1,000 peals of thunder exploding at the same time. It carried with it an endless and boundless aura, as if it had crossed the river of time from ancient times to the present day. A towering shadow appeared in the silver sea, its body level with the heavens. It stretched out a hand and then another, grabbing the sides and ruthlessly ripping them apart. The silver sea was instantly split in half, revealing the true appearance of the towering shadow. This was a giant that surpassed 10,000 feet tall. Its eyes were like the sun and moon, and its aura shook the heavens and earth. The giant stepped forwards. It raised a fist and punched out, a terrifying strength erupting like a volcano. The woodchopper raised his saber and chopped down. The vast and mighty strength was directly split in half, sweeping past both sides of his body. But just as the saber fell, the giant had already punched out a second time. A bitter light flashed in the woodchopper's eyes. As he thought, this flaw couldn't escape the demon sovereign's eyes. Qin Yu had used some unknown method to transform into a giant and was able to block 19 of his saber strikes. But he didn't have full confidence he could block too many of the giant's fists, because the strength he was using right now wasn't his own. The third punch, the fourth punch, the fifth punch. Qin Yu had transformed into ancient. Every time he punched out, his aura would become a bit stronger. The woodchopper raised his saber to block these attacks. Although it seemed easy, his complexion gradually paled. To be more precise, the divine phantasm was a projection. By pouring in a portion of the divine phantasm's power, it could absorb heaven and earth, spiritual strength, and automatically restore itself. But this required time. If the divine phantasm erupted again and again in a short period of time, it would consume too much strength and it would instinctively plunder the host's strength in order to maintain its own existence. The woodchopper was currently withstanding this sort of plundering. Only after personally experiencing it did he know how terrifying this plundering was. It wasn't simply plundering strength, but controlling the body and even the soul. He didn't doubt that if he didn't resist, he would soon be controlled and enslaved by the divine phantasm from the inside out. 13th punch, 14th punch, 26th punch, 27th punch, 30th punch. The woodchopper suddenly flung his hand, sending the hatchet flying far away, allowing it to pierce into the ceiling stone. There was nothing in this world that was absolutely eternal. Even the indestructible ceiling stone could be cut through. Silver white light erupted from his body, seeping out from every pore of his body. This light drew out a phantom that roared in anger. The woodchopper's body shivered and blood oozed out from every orifice of his head. It was clear he was withstanding an extremely horrifying pain, but his expression didn't change at all. His eyes were like an ancient well. He forcefully suppressed the eruption of the divine phantasm and allowed this fist to strike his chest. The sound of bones breaking filled the air. Like an undulating tide, it began to spread outwards from his chest, collapsing wherever it passed. His body was sent flying backwards like a rag. He spat out great mouthfuls of dark red blood, mixed with fragments of his organs. The giant drew back his hand, his eyes locking onto the woodchopper. Why? His voice billowed out. The woodchopper vomited in an incomparably carefree manner. When he finally stopped, he actually smiled. My surname is Woodchopper, and I was originally a woodchopper. This will not change, nor can I change. Otherwise, even if I survived in the end, I would no longer be me. If I wanted to live like this, I could have done so long ago. But I don't want to live like this. The giant's body rapidly shrank, revealing Qin Yu's pale face. Punching out 30 times in a row had consumed a tremendous amount of energy. He easily understood the meaning behind the woodchopper's words, as he thought of old bastard who had died beneath his hands. Even though both of them feared death and had done everything they could to struggle to live, it was clear that the woodchopper still maintained his bottom line. If he was no longer himself, then even if he lived, he would only be a walking corpse wearing a bag of skin. What meaning would there be in that? Easier said than done. Everything in the world was like this. To be able to maintain his bottom line in the face of death and abandon tens of millions of years of suffering, the woodchopper's actions were worthy of admiration. Sensing the slight change in Qin Yu's expression, the woodchopper weakly laughed, a bit of happiness in his voice. To be able to obtain the admiration of His Majesty the Demon Sovereign, I have no regrets in this life. Have I ever thought about what would happen when I died? I thought I would be terrified, but now I am calm. However, for better or worse, I've lived for so many years. If I died too quietly, then I would be unworthy of my age. The woodchopper suddenly lifted a hand and shattered the point between his eyebrows. There was no blood in this terrifying wound. Rather, it emitted a brilliant silver light. This light seemed gentle, but in truth it was as sharp as a blade. It crazily cut at the woodchopper's hands. Flesh and blood flew everywhere, revealing white bones. But in the end, he couldn't escape his fate of being caught. His body violently shaking, the woodchopper forcefully pulled out a silver crystal from between his eyebrows. There was a figure inside that was imprisoned by blood-red chains. The figure roared, unable to break free for a time. The immortal sect took advantage of my misfortune and forced me to lower my head in my desperate situation. Since I am going to die today, I certainly won't let them off easy. Hee, I knew many years ago that the immortal sect was the most fucking unreliable of all, so I kept something in reserve. I never thought I would actually have to use it. He looked at Qin Yu. Your Majesty, the Demon Sovereign, as long as you agree to help me with a small matter, I will give you this partial godhood. Do not underestimate it. Perhaps you will soon discover that this thing is very useful to you. Qin Yu lightly said, Even if you don't give it to me, I can still take it myself. The woodchopper laughed. Your Majesty, there is no need to test me. If I am not willing, you will never obtain it. He took several deep breaths and continued to say, I know that your Majesty is on good terms with the Tao Arena Master. All you need to do is bring a message to him for me. Qin Yu frowned. What message? The woodchopper had a strange expression. What happened in the past was the doing of the immortal sect. Qin Yu maintained his composure. Why should I believe that you aren't deliberately framing me? The woodchopper chuckled. Because in the past I was also one of the participants beneath the Eastern Emperor Stone. Blood stained the dusk. The Tao Arena Master will know that what I say is true. Qin Yu suddenly thought of solitary Westgate's wife and child. He nodded. Very well, I agree. The woodchopper grinned. He loosened his hand, and the partial godhood flew towards him. Qin Yu said, "Purple moon." She seemed especially experienced in dealing with godhoods. A clear and cold voice sounded out very well. Purple moonlight appeared, wrapping around the silver partial godhood. The figure inside seemed to feel a threat and began to struggle even more fiercely. But in the end, it was all useless. The moonlight twisted and wrapped around the partial godhood before vanishing from sight. The woodchopper had completed his final wish. As he thought about how even in death he would set off a great flood in the world, he had a gratified look on his face. He fell to the ground, looking at the endless nothingness above his head. His eyes gradually glazed over, revealing a bit of confusion. The saying that a man on the verge of death speaks kindly didn't apply to the woodchopper. But as Qin Yu watched him walk towards death, he was silent for a moment. Then he slowly said, "At the end of your life, what wishes do you have?" The woodchopper's lips moved. "In this life, I have killed many people. In order to live, I am willing to do anything. If hell truly exists, I am doomed to be sent to the 18th level, never to be reincarnated again. But I have no regrets. Even if I had to do it all over again, I would still do the same thing." His tone was calm, without any unwillingness to continue. After he finished speaking, he simply died, all of his aura vanishing. A gust of wind rose up, and the woodchopper's corpse turned into ashes in the wind. In the blink of an eye, it disappeared without a trace. Hum! The hatchet, which was stuck in the ceiling stone, suddenly let out a trembling sound and split into two. Half of the blade rapidly decayed, and the other half was covered in rust.